A mechanical voice chimed in Leo's head as he stood in the middle of the gallery. Congratulations, host. You have successfully engaged with gold-tier single woman Audrey Sia. Progress is highly effective. Affection has reached 75. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights. Target, Audrey Sia, 18. Net worth, $17,000. Allowance. Intellect, above average 79, with a specialty in fine arts and high political acuity. Appearance, above average 76. Leo recalled the girl with the high ponytail who had just approached him. She'd extended a hand confidently, her introduction crisp and direct. My name is Audrey Sia, as in, where the river's journey ends and the clouds begin to rise. She was poised, radiating a pride that wasn't arrogant, but rather a bright, sunny self-assurance. And now, just from seeing his painting, her affection score had jumped to 75. He was beginning to understand. Artists really did have it easy when it came to romance. A powerful piece of work could act as a halo, making it easy for people to develop feelings. When someone loved the art, they subconsciously blurred the line between the work and its creator. Leo, however, had grown more detached about these scores. A spike in affection didn't mean he had someone wrapped around his finger. The gallery was a spacious labyrinth, a deliberate design choice, he guessed. With relatively few paintings on display, a straightforward layout would have felt empty. The maze-like structure created the illusion of a much larger collection, a true visual feast. Beside each painting stood a small plinth with an iPad displaying information about the artwork and the artist. Since everyone was absorbed in the art, Leo didn't feel the need to trail them like a salesman. He was more curious about who had made the initial bid on his work and went looking for Dr. Croft. After winding through a couple of corridors, he found her chatting with Victoria Vance. Victoria had just seen the portrait of her daughter. Her first thought was how beautifully it was painted. In her mind, this was the daughter she'd always wanted, sweet, beautiful, quietly dedicated to her art. The reality was that Stella hated painting. She'd rather pursue dangerous hobbies than sit at home with a brush. Piano, chess, calligraphy, painting, she had no interest in any of it. She seemed to prefer learning things from her father. A wave of disappointment washed over Victoria. She was torn. Logically, she knew a girl who only knew how to paint and play piano would have a hard time taking over the family business. It was unrealistic, but emotionally, she still yearned for a soft, gentle daughter. People were always greedy, always contradictory, wanting both things at once. For a long time, she and Stella had been like oil and water. There was the incident with the dog. She'd been too quick to trust the person who promised to care for it, never imagining it would lead to such trauma for her daughter. Then, in Stella's senior year of high school, Victoria found out a boy had been harassing her. She'd pulled strings and had him quietly transferred to another school district. Stella had been furious, insisting she'd already handled it. She saw her mother's interference as a gross overstep. In that moment, Victoria's worldview had aligned perfectly with her husband Richard's. Eliminate threats completely. As long as the boy was at the same school, there was always a risk. Teenagers were impulsive. She hadn't anticipated it would trigger such a rebellious streak in Stella. This painting captured the daughter Victoria had always dreamed of, and then, a second later, she wanted to curse someone out. Who gave him permission to paint her? And who gave him permission to exhibit it? That's your daughter? Leo overheard from a distance. Victoria had come to the show to support Dr. Croft, feeling the pride of someone watching a protege they'd helped raise finally take the international stage. But her purchasing habits were whimsical, driven by taste, not trends. With Dr. Croft's reputation soaring, she certainly didn't need Victoria as a buyer. Her plan was to buy a piece if she loved it, and pass if she didn't. As it turned out, nothing had truly grabbed her. She'd been following Genevieve's career for so long that any older pieces she might have liked, she already owned. Compared to the award-winning painting, the artist's more recent works felt like a step down. But Victoria genuinely loved art and could see the progression, the clear evolution in skill. In truth, if you hung the two paintings she owned alongside this new one, you could build an entire exhibit around them. She never expected to see a portrait of her own daughter here. A mother's love for her child needs no Cupid's arrow. It's a direct hit to the heart. She couldn't imagine the circumstances under which Stella would sit so obediently for a portrait. Who painted it? The answer was obvious, though she was reluctant to admit it. Victoria rushed to place a bid. It was an impulsive move. The first bidder often just drives up the price rather than securing the piece. She went back to chatting with Genevieve. When Dr. Croft learned Victoria was the one who had bid on the artist, she was thrilled. It seems my patron's eye is as sharp as mine. We have the same appreciation for beauty. Then she launched into a detailed, heartfelt praise of her new star pupil, Leo Foster. Whether she'd taught him much or not was irrelevant. When you find a prodigy, you claim them. Faced with overwhelming talent, you could become their rival, or you could become their teacher. The advantages of age. Victoria listened, her heart sinking, but kept an elegant smile plastered on her face. Of the three women, Isabel Davenport was the quickest to put the pieces together. She couldn't care less about appreciating art, but she never tired of good gossip. When it came to gossip, she could probably guess if a woman walking past her neighborhood gate was having an affair with her husband. Isabel understood immediately. Dr. Croft's student was Victoria Vance's daughter's boyfriend. Ha ha, this was rich. So that's why there was a painting of Stella. She'd met the girl once, a cool, reserved young woman who seemed quite serious. But the feeling in this painting, this was a girl in love. That sweet, giddy feeling of a first romance was practically spilling out of the canvas. It even reminded Isabel of her own first love. And no, it wasn't Mark. Isabel had thought this outing would be a bore, just humoring Victoria. Now, she was having the time of her life. But when the young man himself walked over and greeted them, "Hello, Dr. Croft, Mrs. Vance," Isabel felt the hand of fate squeezing her throat. He was like one of those TikTok thirst traps come to life, but without the cringe, made real and standing right in front of her. Victoria's daughter is eating well, and I was born too late. The kid was even more striking than his self-portrait, glowing with the soft, lustrous sheen of a precious gem. Isabel nearly drooled, catching herself just in time. She wanted to slap herself. What had she told the artist at that afternoon tea? "Oh, I don't want anything too realistic. I prefer a more abstract style." She wished she could go back in time and slap that pretentious nonsense out of herself. Who cared about abstract? She should have demanded pure realism, an exact likeness. Then again, if the portrait was too realistic, her husband Mark probably wouldn't have been so willing to sell it. Victoria looked at the young man, momentarily speechless. Though this was only the third time she'd seen him in person, she saw him every day at home. The massive portrait was impossible to ignore. She tried to say something, anything. "You should come over for tea sometime." The words were barely out before she wanted to smack her own mouth. What was she thinking? Leo was taken aback by Victoria Vance's warmth. He remembered a girl in elementary school who used to call him constantly to ask about homework. It drove him crazy. She never asked at school, only after he got home, and the questions were always about the simplest problems. How could you not know that? He'd thought, "Are you dumb?" One day after school, the girl's mother saw him and invited him over to their house. He'd given a cool nod, thinking, "You just want me to tutor your daughter." No way. Years later, Victoria Vance was inviting him over for tea. Oh, in that moment, it all clicked. He felt a sudden nervousness, the palms of his hands growing faintly damp. But on the surface, he channeled his inner Alex Young, activating his small talk protocol. He replied politely, his voice steady, his gaze unwavering. After a moment of courteous exchange, he excused himself, pulling Dr. Croft aside. "Dr. Croft, I need to talk to you about something for a second." He was dying to know who had bid on his other two paintings. Dr. Croft was curious too and made a quick inquiry. The bid for the stalwart had been placed by a renowned art critic, Wilder Graves. Leo had never heard of him, but a quick search revealed a long list of titles. President of various art associations, a titan of the industry. It was Wilder who had predicted Dr. Croft would win the Alexander Lucci Painting Prize, a prediction that had come true. And now he had bid on one of Leo's pieces. For a moment, Leo felt a surge of pride. This guy's got a great eye. The other painting, Dawnbreaker, had a bid from a professional proxy buyer, so the identity of the actual purchaser was still a mystery. "Come on, Dr. Croft said. "I'll introduce you to Mr. Graves." She led Leo halfway across the gallery before they ran into him. Leo had pictured an old man, but Wilder Graves was middle-aged, dressed with an impeccable, almost rigid formality that felt like an English take on Japanese style. He wore a fine-grained houndstooth fedora, a matching scarf tied at a perfect right angle, and a heavy black coat. His mustache was a neat line above his lip, mirrored by a small patch below, forming a T. Dr. Croft made the introduction, and Mr. Graves' reaction was effusively theatrical. He clapped Leo on the arm. "A young man of immense talent. Your brushwork is direct, yet comfortable, and brimming with emotion. In a few years, we'll all have to make way for you. I truly adore your painting, The Stalwart. It has vision, it has power, It reminds me of myself as a young man. Leo felt himself starting to float. Culture people had a way of praising you with precise, seemingly modest words that were, in fact, incredibly flattering. If not for his unshakable core, buff, keeping him grounded, he'd be soaring to the ceiling. He managed a humble, composed response. After they chatted, other people came over to greet Mr. Graves, and they separated. Still, being praised so comprehensively by someone of his stature was a new experience. His affection score for me must be through the roof, Leo thought. Curious, he asked Dr. Croft, why isn't Mr. Graves' wife here? Dr. Croft gave him a puzzled look. Don't say that. His wife was a childhood sweetheart. She passed away from an illness 10 years ago. He was deeply devoted to her and never remarried. He paints a portrait of her every year to remember her by. Now, it was Leo's turn to be puzzled. Mr. Graves was single. He seemed to think so highly of Leo, showering him with praise, yet the system hadn't registered even a baseline 60 points of affection. There were two possibilities. First, Mr. Graves wasn't actually single, which would make the annual portraits of his late wife awkward. The other possibility was that he was single, but felt no genuine goodwill toward Leo at all. For the first time, Leo felt the true complexity of the world. He had one foot out of the university, and already society felt like a shock to the system. Dr. Croft, Leo said, testing the waters, I don't think Mr. Graves actually liked my painting that much. He seemed to spend more time in front of the other two pieces. You're a sharp one, kid, she said. But listen, it doesn't matter which one he truly likes. He placed a bid on yours, and that's a public endorsement. My work doesn't need his stamp of approval anymore, and besides, it's too expensive. If you become successful, it proves he has a good eye. For $75,000, he gets to say he discovered the next big thing. Leo still didn't quite get it. 75 grand wasn't chump change. Society was complicated, and maybe his intelligence stat just wasn't high enough yet. A professional proxy buyer, too? He wondered who was behind it. He'd find out soon enough. The exhibition was scheduled for 7 days, and the results would be final then. He hadn't paid much attention to the security cameras before, but now that bids were flying, he saw them for what they were. There were professional guards stationed throughout the gallery as well. To think that his paintings, the work of a complete unknown, were already commanding six-figure bids. It made him realize that Dr. Croft's work selling for millions wasn't so far-fetched. One stray kid with a marker could cause a disaster. He didn't need to stand guard all day. He was worried his roommates were getting bored. Before the trip, Sean had made a checklist of essential New York activities. Walk the Brooklyn Bridge, eat a real slice of pizza, see Times Square, catch a show at the Comedy Cellar, and visit Central Park. Alex had added a visit to the Wishing Shrine in Chinatown and a trip to see his aunt. Leo had plans to meet up with his godparents. Jordan was just along for the ride, happy to be their official appendage. They'd had pizza last night. An expensive correction was in order. Leo had seen king crab on the menu at the Golden Duck for $128 and thought that was the price for the whole dish. He found out later in the group chat that it was $128 per pound. The crab that had arrived, a massive 7-pound behemoth served with lamb rolls, cilantro, and dipping sauces, had cost over $900. Ryan had really shelled out. Leo had initially thought his cousin was a savvy, budget-conscious host, and that the big city prices weren't so bad after all. He'd forgotten to check the unit of measurement. Aside from the crab, the rest of the meal hadn't been outrageously expensive, plus a 10% service charge. It was clear that the kind of service where the manager personally escorts you to your table didn't come cheap. Ryan was a true New Yorker, generous to a fault, treating a bunch of country bumpkins to a meal like that. Around noon, Ryan called again, offering to treat them to lunch. Leo and Sean quickly declined. Sean had just found out how expensive dinner was, and suddenly decided that king crab was, in fact, the most delicious thing he'd ever eaten. At over $100 a bite, how could it not be? They provide a staff meal, Leo said. The gallery gives us vouchers for the Ritz-Carlton. We can just grab something casual there. Besides, even if there wasn't a staff meal, they could always hit the executive lounge for snacks. They were still full from breakfast anyway. It was a common hotel phenomenon. You eat so much at the breakfast buffet that you lose your lunch. Ryan couldn't persuade them, but Alex enthusiastically dragged him along to the hotel buffet. Ryan's two friends, Connor and Audrey, decided to stay and freeload as well. Ryan was a little surprised. Connor was known for being proud, almost aloof in their social circle. The fact that he'd stick around for a free meal was out of character. Connor just looked exasperated. He didn't want to stay either, but his cousin kept pinching his arm under the table until it was bruised. So he stayed. If Dr. Croft weren't a famous artist, The lunch would have been a formal, stuffy affair. She and Leo would have been at a long table with patrons, critics, and university officials, exchanging pleasantries and making stilted conversation. It would have been a high-stakes networking event, easily costing thousands of dollars, where no one actually enjoyed the food. But Dr. Croft was an artist, and a notoriously eccentric one at that, with the delicate air of a woman who might keel over at any moment. She had no time for such formalities. Lunch was a staff meal, and any visiting dignitaries could fend for themselves. People often said that leaders in the cultural sector ran a clean department, and compared to others, it was true. There wasn't much money, and as for power, many artists were so unworldly and proud that they were impossible to manage. If you pushed them too hard, they'd simply retreat into their studios and not come out. The usual approach with well-known artists was to get them to join an association, bring them into the fold, and let them experience the structured, hierarchical world of officialdom. Some assimilated quickly, attending meetings and acting more like officials than the officials themselves, their creative work often suffering as a result. Others recoiled, unable to adapt to the rigid systems, and burrowed deeper into their own creative worlds. Still others simply faded into obscurity. Life was a process of mutual infiltration. Dr. Croft, however, already had an official position within the university system and enough artistic achievement to do as she pleased. With her as a shield, Leo could maintain a relatively pure creative environment. It was dangerous to give a young artist too much power or status. It could easily corrupt them, extinguishing their creative spark. So for lunch, even Dr. Croft was eating at the buffet. Of course, the buffet at the Ritz-Carlton was a high-end affair, easily costing over $100 per person. Victoria Vance and Isabel Davenport joined her. Victoria was, in a sense, the one who had discovered Genevieve, following her career from the very beginning. The young painter's rise to fame was a story of mutual success. The more renowned Dr. Croft became, the more Victoria's collection of her early works appreciated in value. For the wealthy, money came from all directions. Even the art they bought worked hard to increase its own worth. Dr. Croft was an anomaly in the art world. She wasn't classically trained and had no powerful backers. She had fought her way up like a bamboo shoot, pushing through rocks and hard-packed earth, growing strong roots until she became a tall, unshakable bamboo tree, basking in the sunlight at the top of the canopy. And now, a student like Leo was a young shoot she was protecting. By putting his work in this exhibition, she was showing the world how beautiful the shoot was, how promising its future. But a shoot pulled from the earth too soon might stop growing. It could be canned, eaten, or left to rot. To become a mighty bamboo, it needed time, its roots deep in the soil, slowly absorbing nutrients. That's why Dr. Croft wasn't rushing to introduce Leo to everyone. She was showing off her prized shoot, then hiding it away to let it grow. It was like in the old days, when a noble family would let their daughter's reputation for beauty spread, but they wouldn't parade her around for all to see. Only courtesans were put on display, not ladies of good breeding. Dr. Croft ate with gusto, making a beeline for the spicy lobster, spicy clams, and spicy beef. The cold-sliced spicy beef tendon was excellent, incredibly fresh. It was a shame the New York Ritz-Carlton buffet didn't have her beloved spicy beef jerky. Not very inclusive. Victoria ate a balanced, healthy meal. Isabel, on the other hand, used to subsist on a cocktail of pills and supplements instead of actual food. She'd recently quit after calculating that her monthly pill budget ran into the tens of thousands. Her husband Mark had to work very hard to support her expensive habits. So now she was eating real food again. If she got fat, so be it. At her age, a little extra weight was a sign of good fortune. The three of them ate cheerfully, the conversation inevitably circling back to Leo. Victoria tried to tune it out, but Isabel's questions were relentless. How did you spot that young man in the first place? Isabel asked, her eyes gleaming. You teach him, every day. What's he really like? As she spoke, she thought, no wonder Genevieve looks so young and carefree. She gets to spend her days with a handsome young man like that. At this, Dr. Croft preened. Well, first, he's obviously gorgeous. Unforgettable at first glance. My daughter is probably just as shallow, Victoria thought. All that talk about not liking handsome boys. You can't trust a word a teenage girl says, not even to her own mother. Second, Dr. Croft continued. He has to be handsome without being aware of it. He can't be arrogant about his looks. Yes. Isabel agreed wholeheartedly. The TikTok streamers she used to watch were all insufferably vain. The moment they opened their mouths, their handsome as everything attitude came pouring out, and it was so greasy. But the most important thing is his growth, Dr. Croft said, her tone growing more serious. Leo is a child who grows incredibly fast. I can see a change in him at every stage, and it's always a good change. Look at how well he gets along with his roommates. He's generous, but he has boundaries. He's just easy to be around. After a moment, she added, and the boy makes the most incredible tea. Victoria, you haven't had his tea. If you did, everything else would taste like dishwater by comparison. Dr. Croft couldn't bring herself to call people Mrs. So-and-so. It wasn't in her independent nature. She called Isabel by her first name, just as she did with Victoria. Isabel wasn't used to it first, but after a few times, she was touched. In her social circles, she was always Mrs. Davenport. She'd nearly forgotten her own first name. It made her feel like an equal, not someone to be looked down on just because her husband's business had gone bankrupt. Victoria had tasted it once at the university. It was true. With her years of experience as a tea connoisseur, she had to admit the young man's brew was exceptional, and that tea Stella had brought home. She thought her daughter had finally learned to buy gifts for her parents. Turns out it was from him. Of course, Richard probably knew all along. When women start gossiping, the brakes fail. Dr. Croft couldn't help herself. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if about to reveal a state secret. Isabel leaned closer, and even Victoria sat up straighter. But none of that is the main thing, Dr. Croft whispered. You know when I went abroad for the award ceremony? The flight was so long, I threw out my back. The jet lag was brutal. They sent me to a hospital, put me in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank, but they couldn't fix my back. When I got home, I tried my spa, nothing. I was desperate, so I called Leo over. He knows therapeutic massage. It's unbelievable. I'd pulled a muscle painting before, and he fixed it in 3 sessions. He says his grandmother was a head nurse, and he practically grew up in a hospital. I don't know who his girlfriend is, but she's the luckiest girl alive. Is it really that good? And it's just a massage? Isabel asked, her words tumbling out. Of course it is. It's like a real physical therapist, not one of those spa treatments that just relaxes you for an hour. This is therapeutic. He gets it done in minutes. You see me looking so energetic right now? I was in bed all day yesterday. I specifically called him over this morning to work on my back so I could stand up straight. She took a happy bite of spicy beef tendon. I envy his future girlfriend's family. I'm thinking of convincing him to come to New York for grad school. Then I'd have him close by. Wouldn't that be perfect? Isabel thought, is it too late to adopt Victoria's daughter as my goddaughter? Victoria said nothing. She quietly messaged her proxy buyer. Plus 100K. The buyer replied, Ma'am, there are no other bidders. The highest bid is still yours. Are you sure you want to increase your own bid? Victoria, confirm. When college students eat at a buffet, they automatically acquire a new skill, avoiding their professors at all costs. The moment Leo and his roommates spotted Dr. Croft's table, they mapped a wide, circuitous route to the food stations in her vicinity. It was an unwritten rule of the universe. As a student, any person with the title of professor exerts a natural gravitational pull of authority over you. Thanks to their strategic detour, Leo missed hearing himself become the main topic of gossip. The restaurant was vast, with multiple sections, each offering a spectacular view of the city. It wasn't too crowded for lunch, making for a comfortable dining experience, unlike the chaotic free-for-alls that happen when a tour group descends on a buffet. The original group of 4 had expanded. Ryan was there along with his 2 friends, Connor Brighton and Audrey Sia. They had also run into Ethan, Dr. Croft's graduate assistant, who, after a friendly invitation from Leo, had honestly just tagged along. It's what students do. Once they were seated, however, Ethan felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He was fine with Leo's roommates. They seemed easygoing enough. But the others, having spent years in the city, Ethan had developed a keen sensitivity to the aura of the New York elite. You could easily distinguish the out-of-towners from the locals and the locals from the real New Yorkers. It was a palpable vibe. To his surprise, both Leo and his roommate Alex seemed to have a bit of that city swagger themselves. As a result, Ethan ate stiffly, trying to make himself useful by fetching things for everyone. Sean, who was normally the most reserved of the group, suddenly found a kindred spirit. Without a camera in his hand, he felt awkward. But seeing Ethan's discomfort, Sean recognized it instantly. The two of them bonded over a trip to the carving station, 2 introverts finding solace in a sea of extroverts. The atmosphere at the table immediately lightened. Ethan had misjudged Sean. He'd seen him lugging that camera around with such a serious expression and assumed he was some kind of creative genius, especially since he was the one handling the logistics for Leo's incredible painting. He'd been grateful for Sean's patient guidance. Jordan, ever the blunt one, piped up between bites. Leo, your portrait of Jessica is even better than the one of Stella. What's up with that? Leo froze. Alex casually placed a crab leg on Jordan's plate. This one's full of meat. Sweet, too. Eat up. He had noticed it long ago, the way Jessica Monroe's eyes would linger on Leo. It was a classic crush, so obvious a blind man could see it. But you don't meddle in other people's affairs, especially when it comes to love. Alex, a veteran of many relationships, knew this well. He followed up the crab leg with a piece of cake for Jordan. After swallowing his dessert, Jordan clarified, I was just saying it's a great painting. I wonder which connoisseur had the good sense to bid on it. His dad's promise of a 100-fold return on his investment had been partially reneged on. He'd only gotten $8,000, with the other $72,000 still pending. Otherwise, well, he probably wouldn't have bid anyway. He was a second-generation factory kid on a budget. Maybe he could just offer to wash Leo's socks in exchange for a portrait of his own. Leo had captured something essential in Jessica's painting, a kind of beautiful, strong, tragic vibe. And after seeing the real Jessica without makeup when she was sick, the mystique had faded a bit. He preferred powerful, capable women, not the girl next door type. Audrey Sia, a native New Yorker, picked up on the subtext immediately. I disagree, she said, her insight sharp. You can tell from the painting of the girl, the artist, that Leo is deeply in love with her. The affection is practically pouring out of the canvas. Dawnbreaker is stunning, full of empathy and admiration, but there's no love in it. Leo gave the girl a mental thumbs up. Connor was mostly there to chaperone his cousin, who was utterly obsessed with art. In families like theirs, where future financial security was a given, many of the younger generation were free to pursue their passions. Art was a perfect outlet. It was expensive and catered to a free-spirited mindset. It was better than them getting into drugs or gambling, anyway. But as the sole heir, Connor didn't have that luxury. The pressure on him was immense. He decided to stay not just for Audrey, but because Ryan's cousin and his friends were surprisingly interesting. They seemed like people worth knowing. Ryan, despite being 6 months younger than Alex, was a year ahead in school. He'd graduated early from university abroad and was already working, though he still felt like a fish out of water back in the States. He'd been readjusting for a while, much like his cousin Shelley, whose blunt personality would have gotten her fired a dozen times over if her dad wasn't the director. When New York elites get together, they play a game of connecting the dots. It didn't take long for Connor to place Alex. You know, you look familiar when I first saw you, Connor said to Alex. I just figured it out. I was in Bridgeport on business a while back for a municipal event, and I had the pleasure of meeting your father, Mayor Young, a very warm and charismatic man. Alex gave a self-deprecating smile. Yeah, my dad got the looks and the charm. I, on the other hand, look like I've been in a hurry my whole life. Sean, sitting nearby, had known Alex's dad was a deputy mayor, but it had always been an abstract concept. Alex never put on airs in the dorm. Hearing it from an outsider, it finally sank in. My roommate's dad is a real-life mayor. It felt surreal. Ethan, gnawing on a crab leg, was unfazed. Knew it. A mayor's son. No wonder he could get a room upgrade just by showing his face. The hotel must keep a list of important guests. Leo, who had been surrounded by powerful people lately, took it in stride. Still, he admired Alex. If his own father, Ray Foster, were even a department head, Leo would probably be insufferable by now, maybe even have dropped out to start a trucking company. A kid he knew from back home, whose dad was a section chief, had done just that and was now, according to his mom, rolling in it with a BMW X5 and a sprawling 2,500-square-foot apartment. Alex's dad was a mayor, yet he was still down to earth, eating barbecue and takeout with them. Leo figured he was safe. No matter how deep Connor dug, he'd never trace a line back to the laid-off factory workers of a small third-tier city. So he relaxed and enjoyed his meal. Then, the conversation turned to him. A friend of mine recently showed me a portrait of his grandfather, Connor said, raising his glass of soda. It was incredibly striking, so full of life. I remember seeing the artist's signature, and wondering who it was. I never expected to meet the artist himself here today. It's truly a fortunate coincidence. This is worth a toast. Leo, who had been sipping his own soda, nearly choked. This guy was a master at connecting dots. It was just a quick sketch, Leo said, recovering. I went deep-sea fishing with Judge Cole and his family and did on a whim. I'm surprised you remember it, Connor. You have a great memory. He downed the rest of his soda in one gulp. Ethan's eyes widened. I knew it. The mayor's son didn't even get a toast, but this kid did. Leo's background had to be even more profound. He went back to his crab leg. It was delicious, even if it was a little hard on the teeth. During the meal, everyone resisted the urge to pull out their phones. If it had just been the four roommates, they would have been eating and scrolling simultaneously. But with others present, they maintained a polite, phone-free zone. Connor, in particular, was an intimidating presence. He was like an upgraded version of Alex, smarter, more accomplished, and with an even greater air of casual superiority. Learning he was a graduate of an Ivy League school only amplified his aura. Ryan had mentioned that Connor's family background was far more powerful than his own, and Ryan's family already owned a brownstone in the city, with his dad holding a high-level government position. You could tell just by Ryan's deferential attitude. New York elites have a finely tuned sense of hierarchy. To Leo, Connor seemed like a real-life hexagonal warrior, handsome, brilliant, and effortlessly knowledgeable about everything. When Jordan brought up a current event, Connor would seamlessly join the conversation, not with vague "I heard somewhere" statements, but with concrete facts, citing specific times, places, and people. It was all real, no bluffing. He understood the inner workings of both government and private sectors without ever sounding like he was showing off. His take on the recent advancements of the AI company DeepSeek was particularly insightful. Jordan, a natural conversationalist, leaned forward. Connor, what's your take on DeepSeek? A lot of people are worried about being replaced by AI. We have machines in our factory now that do jobs people used to do. There's a lot of resistance. Connor looked at the earnest young man and nodded. He'd recently had this very conversation with a friend from MIT. I believe the development of DeepSeek is about more than just surpassing our rivals or replacing jobs. It's about humanity needing a higher level of computational power. The threats we face aren't just from other humans. They could be extraterrestrial. We need to be better prepared. The ultimate goal of AI development is strategic foresight. We have to get ready. This was a perspective none of them had ever considered. They listened, captivated. A conversation with someone on a higher level could truly open your mind. Alex led the way, and they all raised their glasses to Connor. To Connor, to technological progress, and to the future. As young people, they found common ground easily. Even when their views differed, they were open-minded enough to listen. Audrey, despite her artistic inclinations, was sharp and well-versed on a surprising range of topics, especially politics. She spoke with a clarity and conviction that was rare among the girls they knew. She told Leo she planned on becoming a diplomat, but that it wouldn't conflict with her passion for painting. She was already fluent in English, French, and German. Damn, these New York girls are on another level, Leo thought. He'd initially pegged her as a potential love-struck fangirl when her affection score shot to 75 after barely a greeting. But she was anything but. Her thinking was clear, her analysis precise and insightful. The meal was an education. Ryan was relatively simple, overshadowed by Alex's presence. Ethan was shy and reserved, but Ryan's two friends were genuinely brilliant. It was a humbling reminder that there were always bigger fish in the sea. It also served to rein in Leo's own growing ego. He had needed a full suite of system cheats just to get a seat at this table. These people were the real deal. He couldn't get complacent. He needed to keep working. The depth of their conversation wasn't something you could get from scrolling TikTok or Instagram. It came from reading, from studying, from a genuine capacity for analysis and critical thought. The experience was a lesson for Alex, too. Outside of their dorm, Alex often projected a miniature version of that New York swagger, a mature, slightly superior air. He thought he was being humble, but others still picked up on his future senator vibe. Now, encountering a more advanced version of his own archetype, he finally understood what people meant. Connor probably thought of himself as a humble guy, slumming it at a buffet with some college kids from out of town. But the aura was still there, an unconscious confidence. Alex admired his knowledge, recognizing that Connor had access to a higher tier of information and influence. In an age of information overload, echo chambers were becoming as rigid and difficult to break through as social classes. He needed to work harder to climb higher. Of course, he couldn't get ahead of himself. You don't become a big shot just by having lunch with one. That's how you end up being one of those pathetic guys whose every story starts with "I know a guy," and who mistakes others' achievements for their own. Alex did a quick self-check. Learn from their strengths. The road ahead is long. It was good to have a direction, a reason to strive. The real danger for kids like him was aimlessness. He felt like he was on the third floor of a 10-story building, with 7 more floors to climb. He was full of fighting spirit. Sean, as always, was humble, treating everyone at the table as a teacher. He said little but listened intently. Jordan was just there for the food and good company. It was a long lunch, but a fascinating one. Connor also seemed to feel the trip was worthwhile. This Leo Foster was an interesting character. His background had to be significant. He carried himself with an air that couldn't come from an ordinary family. Connor found himself talking more than usual, showing off almost like a peacock spreading its feathers. It had been years since he'd felt the need to do that. After lunch, they said their goodbyes, promising to meet up again before Leo's group left the city. They exchanged contact info. Leo's friends list now included a New York power player, a girl from the same circles, who, according to Connor, came from an even more influential family, and Alex's cousin. Ryan enthusiastically added Sean. Connor had briefly perked up when he heard about the TikTok channel, but hadn't seemed to take it seriously. The semi-formal lunch was over. It had been surprisingly exhausting. A voice echoed in Leo's mind. Congratulations, host, you passed the test. By encountering more outstanding peers, you have recognized your own shortcomings. You were able to correctly examine your heart, without envy or insecurity, and maintain a willingness to learn. Reward. Intermediate item card, Capybara interference buff, permanent. When faced with a crisis, do not panic. Silently chant Capybara to slow down the progression of events, giving you more time to think. Leo blinked. The first thing he did was check his phone to see if Stella had messaged him. For people in the throes of a new relationship, especially after that, the first period of separation was always the hardest. Every message felt urgent. Before lunch, he told her he was eating and that he had run into her mother. Stella had replied with a single, loaded period. He typed back, your mom bid on your portrait. 100,000. Stella, I guess that's fine. Leo, do you want to come see it? That's when he'd gone to eat. Now he saw her reply. It's okay. I'll see my portrait when I get home anyway. Jessica's cold isn't completely gone. She had a fever again last night. She heard about some celebrity who died from the flu recently, and I think it freaked her out, made her feel worse. Leo, well, take care of yourself. Don't get sick. Stella. After lunch, they headed back to the hotel to rest. Leo had a habit of taking afternoon naps. Jordan had a habit of afternoon gaming sessions. Alex, ever the old man, also had a nap and reflection routine. Sean was anxious to get back and edit his videos. The plan was to rest, then go for a swim. After the swim, they'd hit the executive lounge for some snacks to tide them over for dinner, then head out to the comedy show. Though Alex and Jordan weren't short on cash, their allowances weren't unlimited. They were seniors now, so their parents had loosened the purse strings, but it was still important to budget. Save where you can, spend where you must. They'd agreed to cover the cost for the trip, but they knew Leo and Sean wouldn't be comfortable if they spent too lavishly. Back in their room, Sean immediately set up his laptop while Leo scrolled through TikTok to see how his online persona was doing. There were two Leos in the world now, one in reality and one living on the internet. His videos were being reposted everywhere. Instagram, YouTube. It was strange seeing himself on YouTube, with its wilder, more meme-heavy comment section. The YouTube audience seemed to love the more rustic content. The spicy rice cake video, his first time on a plane, the poached fish on the boat, the clips from Sean's hometown. They weren't interested in the quiet, aesthetic moments from campus life. Instagram was the opposite. They only wanted the aspirational content. The comments, there were a whole different vibe. A meticulous breakdown of his outfits, complete with brand names and prices he didn't even know himself. He wasn't famous enough to be recognized on the street. Not yet. With a national population in the billions, his 23 million followers were a drop in the bucket. Still, his numbers were growing fast, especially since the university president had given them the grant. With that safety net, Sean was editing with more confidence, and it showed. The recent content felt more polished and harmonious. After a while, Leo put his phone down to rest. If he didn't, he knew time would warp, and an hour would vanish in the blink of an eye. They'd agreed to meet at the pool in an hour. The hotel pool was on an upper floor, an infinity pool with a stunning view of the city below, a classic influencer photo spot. Not that any of them were planning a photo shoot. Other than the shirtless pics he sent to Stella, Leo wasn't in the habit of posting thirst traps. It was more about the principle of the thing. We're here, so we might as well use it. Access to the pool, which normally cost a hefty fee, was included with their room. It would be a waste not to go. Leo called out to Sean to take a break, but Sean shook his head. I'm not tired. This is nothing. Farm work back home. Now that's tiring. My sleep quality is great. When I'm out, I'm out. Leo napped for half an hour, then changed into his swim trunks and wrapped himself in a plush hotel robe. Sean got up and did the same, looking a little awkward in the fancy garment. He felt like one of the characters from that old movie, Big Shot's Funeral. The two of them, robed and ready, knocked on the door across the hall. Alex and Jordan emerged in identical attire. It was hilarious. Jordan looked especially comical, round and fluffy in his robe. The four of them padded down the carpeted hallway in a grand procession, a procession that immediately lost all its swagger when a housekeeping attendant greeted them with a cheerful good afternoon. Luckily, the pool was mostly empty. Even Alex would have been a little self-conscious in tight swim trunks in front of a crowd. They all knew the rules. Swim caps required. Those glamorous Instagram photos of people with long, flowing hair in the pool were all staged. The moment your head goes under, the cap goes on. Otherwise, the filters get clogged. A person who still looks good in a swim cap is a person who is truly attractive. Leo's features were well-proportioned, so the cap suited him. Jordan, however, had a bit of a flat head, a common result of old superstitions about how babies should sleep, and the cap only accentuated the width of his face. Alex's face also looked large in the cap, but his strong, square jaw kept him from looking ridiculous. Sean was tan, resembling a little dark eel. Leo hadn't ever really swum with his roommates before. He set a personal goal of swimming for an hour and dove in. He quickly observed their styles. Sean's was a frantic doggy paddle, inefficient but surprisingly fast. Alex had clearly had lessons. His form was textbook perfect, but he moved through the water with the leisurely pace of a retiree. Jordan was just splashing around, having the time of his life. A lifeguard sat perched on a high chair, glancing at them occasionally before returning to his phone. After a few warm-up laps, Leo asked Jordan and Sean if they wanted some pointers to make it easier. Jordan was eager to venture into the deep end, so he readily agreed. Sean was a product of the wild, having learned to swim in a deep pond 5 kilometers from his village where survival was a matter of luck. He agreed to learn, but his ingrained, self-taught habits were hard to break. The correct form felt slow and unnatural to him. He decided to stick with what he knew and let Leo focus on Jordan. Leo found Jordan to be a quick study. With no bad habits to unlearn, he picked up the technique easily. When Jordan realized he could actually swim across the shallow end without needing to stand up or cling to the side, his face lit up with pure joy. Leo left him to practice and headed to the deep end to get his own laps in. It felt good to be in the water again. Swimming took more prep than running, but it was a fantastic full-body workout. He paused at the edge of the pool, looking out at the city. The sunny morning had given way to an overcast afternoon. The wind was picking up, howling between the tall buildings. He took a sip of water and dove back in. Sean's improper form was starting to make his back ache, so he took a break. Jordan was exhausted from his lesson. Alex, the geriatric swimmer, continued his steady, corpse-like float across the pool. They all ended up lounging on the deck chairs, watching Leo. They had to admit the guy had stamina. As he swam, Leo tried out his new buff, silently chanting capybara. Nothing happened. He shrugged and kept swimming. Once he'd had his fill, they all soaked in the hot tub for a bit before heading back to their rooms to shower, agreeing to meet in the executive lounge afterward. Leo felt like the shared experience, the vulnerability of being half-naked together, had brought them closer. They had, after all, seen each other in their swim trunks. After a swim and a shower, everyone felt like their attractiveness score had gone up a few points. They headed to the executive lounge. The attendant at the entrance recognized the group of four and waved them in without even checking their key cards. It was still early for dinner, but the lounge was already bustling. Many guests who paid thousands for a room would stretch the breakfast buffet until 10, have a late afternoon meal in the lounge, and call it a day, saving money on eating out. Sean noticed a few people working on laptops and felt a flash of kinship. He had become one of them, always looking for a spare moment to open his laptop and edit. It was funny how things that once seemed impossibly difficult, like video editing and photography, have become second nature once he started doing them for a living. When you love what you do, or rather, when you do it for a living, you suddenly find yourself becoming an expert. The glamour faded quickly, though. He felt less like a sophisticated professional and more like a workhorse, constantly moving from one pasture to the next. The four of them were famished after their swim. Leo's strategy was to take a small sample of everything first, then go back for larger portions of his favorites. He also got a bowl of noodle from a noodle bar, loading it up with toppings like braised tofu and fatty pork belly. As he was eating, the system chimed in. Host swam diligently and successfully taught a fellow student to swim. The act of teaching has been completed. Reward: teacher's aura buff, 10 days. With this buff, when you're teaching others, the probability that they will listen without resentment increases by 80%. Well, that's a handy tool for forcing knowledge on people, Leo thought with a smirk. He was drawing a few glances. He was a handsome young man, well-dressed, with an approachable yet subtly distant vibe. It was different from Connor's innate pride. Leo's was a more hidden reserve, a quiet dignity that Connor had found so intriguing and unfathomable. Connor had been doing some digging. Appearance can be altered, fashion can be bought, but a person's bearing is hard to fake. He knew Alex was a politician's son and Jordan a factory owner's son. He pegged Sean as a hardworking kid from a rural background, a potential self-made man, but still far from it. But Leo was a mystery. He seemed so down to earth, yet Connor sensed something more. He discovered that Leo held a level 1 national title in the tea ceremony and had even won an international competition against a so-called tea immortal who served the Emperor of Japan. This only confirmed his suspicions. Who but the scion of an old, established family would have the time and resources to master such a traditional art? And when asked why he competed, Leo had casually said he was just helping out an elder. Connor had also found Leo's TikTok. There are videos of him riding horses, looking skilled and genuinely happy. He made a mental note and texted a friend whose family owned a private ranch just outside the city. Leo and his roommates were enjoying the lounge feast, which was a definite step up from the campus cafeteria. Just as they were finishing, Leo's phone rang. It was Connor. "When are you guys free?" Connor asked. "I can take you to a friend's horse ranch for a ride." Leo looked at his roommates, specifically at Alex, who gave a nod. "We're free for the next few days. Whenever works for you, Connor. Thanks for arranging this." "No trouble at all. It's a private ranch, just for us. I'll text you the details once I've set a time. I'll have a car pick you up from the hotel." He hung up. Sean shook his head in amazement. People in New York are so hospitable. I thought he was just being polite when he mentioned it. Jordan just chuckled. Alex clarified, "It's not about hospitality, Sean. He thinks Leo is a big deal and wants to network with him. That's why he's inviting us." Sean was momentarily stunned. He and Leo were together all the time, and he'd never thought of him as a big deal someone wanted to network with. It was a strange, complex feeling. He could understand someone wanting to connect with Alex, the mayor's son, but the call had been for Leo. A sense of urgency washed over Sean. He needed to work harder, improve his skills. He needed to listen more and talk less. Jordan wouldn't have made a naive comment like that. He just laughed. Sean realized he was still a bit too simple. But he was lucky. He was Leo's roommate, and their friendship was solid from the start. After their meal, they headed out to the comedy club. The four of them piled into a cab, with Jordan taking the front seat. The club looked just as they'd imagined, with a famous overpass nearby, just like in the stand-up specials. It was less about the comedy itself and more about the pilgrimage, a quintessential tourist experience. The place was packed. Their tickets were for a VIP table near the stage, off to the right side, with tea and sunflower seeds. The interior was classic and atmospheric. Sean took out his phone to film some B-roll for his vlog. They had arrived just in time. The show started moments after they sat down. The audience was mostly out-of-towners like them. The opening act came on stage in a traditional long gown. He was a new face, and his jokes felt a little forced. His delivery was rapid-fire, and without subtitles, some of the punchlines were lost on them. But the local regulars in the audience laughed on cue. The show was long, as the tickets weren't cheap. They sat through it patiently, like good students in a lecture they didn't understand. Jordan occasionally whispered jokes to Leo, who was busy texting Stella. Suddenly, Jordan nudged him. "Leo, check the news." Leo opened his browser. There they were, trending topics 9 and 10. Newcomer painter him. Sees first work fetch astonishing $650,000 at auction. Dr. Genevieve Croft, America's sole winner of painting's Nobel Prize, sees latest piece break $1.5 million. At that exact moment, the comedian on stage pointed into the crowd and yelled, "Hey, you're about to be famous." Youth burns bright, and the night was still young. Their next stop was the legendary Ember Street, Bridgeport's premier food destination. At night, the street was a blaze of lights, its classic architecture giving it the feel of a historical film set. Its proximity to the Embassy District meant you could see groups of foreigners enjoying the nightlife. They weren't there for the main strip, however. Jordan, a master at sniffing out hidden gems, led them down a series of side streets and alleys. Sean filmed the journey, a potential foodie adventure segment for the vlog. The night air was cold, and the historic buildings, combined with the sight of a few girls in long, flowing white dresses with their hair blowing across their faces, created a genuinely spooky atmosphere. Finally, Jordan stopped in front of a minivan parked in a narrow alley, a makeshift barbecue stall set up beside it. The place was already packed with what looked like regulars, including a conspicuous table of blonde foreigners. A large industrial fan was strategically placed to blow the fragrant smoke down the alley, the same trick the spicy rice cake vendor used back at school. That's why they had smelled it from blocks away. What's left? Jordan asked the owner, all business. Beef, pork belly ends, sirloin cap, and lamb. That's it. Wings, ribs, kidneys, all gone. We'll take 4 of each. Help yourselves to drinks and veggies over there, the owner grunted, not looking up from the grill. It was a 2-man operation, and they were slammed. They snagged a small, recently vacated table. Jordan explained the system. All the skewers are $25 each. They're huge, like half a pound of meat per skewer. Drinks and veggies are free. He and Alex went to grab drinks while Leo and Sean wiped down the table again. As they sat down, a city code enforcement officer appeared at the mouth of the alley. Leo's first instinct was to run. His dad used to tell stories about being chased off by officers when he was a street vendor. The table of foreigners, however, continued to eat and drink loudly, one of them even filming the officer on his phone. "Look, the cops are here," he shouted in accented English. The officer just stood there. This must be the big city for you, Leo thought. Civilized enforcement. Or maybe they don't want to cause a scene in front of the foreigners. Reassured, they settled in. Leo looked up the cuts of meat on his phone. Pork belly ends and sirloin cap, the prize cut near the cow's tail. The smell from the charcoal grill was intoxicating. Their meat hit the fire, sizzling and spitting. They waited, their anticipation growing. Leo snapped a picture and sent it to Stella, then to his family group chat. His godfather, surprisingly, was still awake. He replied with a picture of his own meal, a simple-looking 2-meat, 2-veg dinner from a government cafeteria. Except one of the meats was sea cucumber. Godmother, that doesn't look very good. Are you craving barbecue? Shelly, we're arriving tomorrow. When are you free? Leo, my hotel is in a pretty convenient spot. Want me to book you a room here? Shelly, no need, we have a place to stay. We'll talk when we see you. He put his phone away as Sean nudged him. A white van had pulled up, and half a dozen more burly officers stepped out. This was a full-on raid. 7 uniformed officers walked up to the vendor. One of them spoke, his tone polite but firm. You can't sit up here. Finish grilling what you've got on the fire. Let your customers finish eating and then pack it up. No more new orders. The few people who had been waiting had to leave. You got it, understood, the owner replied calmly. It was clear this was a familiar dance. The officers waited by their van while the owner leisurely finished grilling. Leo and his friends were the lucky last customers. The young foreigner, who had been so excited by the drama, seemed disappointed by the anticlimactic resolution. Their skewers arrived, hot off the grill. Perhaps it was the cold air, or the presence of 7 uniformed officers waiting for them to finish, but the barbecue tasted absolutely incredible. They ate quickly as the owner efficiently packed up his stall. Leo realized that despite the high revenue, the job was tough, with constant risk and potential waste. But he had to hand it to the city. Even a crackdown on illegal vendor was handled with a surprising amount of civility. The sirloin cap was lean and flavorful, the beef more tender and delicious than the steak he'd had at the Michelin-starred restaurant with Stella. For $25 a skewer, it was a steal. The meal left them feeling full, warm, and deeply satisfied. As they walked back to the main road to catch a cab, the system's voice returned. Host has successfully discovered a hidden culinary treasure. Reward. Intermediate item. Enhanced palate buff. Permanent. With this buff, you'll be able to more deeply appreciate the essence of fine food. Side effect. Unpleasant food will taste even more unpleasant. Jordan was a treasure. This permanent skill was a huge win. The system had given him temporary taste buffs before, like free samples, but this was the real deal. He brushed off the side effect. College students were used to bad food. They got back to the hotel, the warmth of the lobby a welcome relief from the biting wind. The next morning, Leo started his day on the treadmill in the hotel gym. Sean was there to film. The man with the plaid collar was back, this time with a scantily clad young woman. It was hard to tell who was the hunter and who was the prey. After his run, Leo went for a swim while Sean got his footage and then headed back to edit. An hour in the pool, and Leo felt every muscle in his body awaken, ready for a massive breakfast. Today's plan was to visit the National Monument in the morning, then head to Professor Reed's house for a Korean barbecue lunch. Dr. Croft was joining them there directly. Before they left, however, Leo made a quick stop at Dr. Croft's suite for his daily half-hour massage session, bringing Sean along as a chaperone. Dr. Croft, he asked as he worked on her back. What happened with the auction prices yesterday? I thought my paintings were at around $450,000 in the morning. Dr. Croft sighed. The exhibition had been planned long before her award. but the wind had turned it into a media circus. The prices were getting out of hand, and she worried it wasn't necessarily a good thing for a newcomer like Leo. A painting of his selling for so much could breed jealousy and resentment among other artists. Her own work was now fetching bids in the millions. In this economic climate, it felt insane. Are they just waiting for me to die? The thought was genuinely unsettling. The bid on the artist is from Victoria Vance, she explained. She raised it another 100,000, so it's at 200,000 now. Mr. Graves bid 75,000 on the stalwart, and someone else raised it to 150. Dawnbreaker is still at 150,000 from that proxy buyer. They say the client is a Chinese American who's flying in from overseas. So that was how it reached $450,000. I'm thinking of ending the auction after 3 days, she said. 7 days is too long. We can't get too greedy. After tomorrow, the paintings will be for exhibition only. I'm fine with whatever you decide, Dr. Croft, Leo said. Good. I'll have my staff post an announcement. This whole thing is getting too crazy. After the massage, they headed out. They took the subway to the Federal Plaza, a sea of people even on a weekday. The security check was rigorous. For some reason, Alex, who usually sailed through such things with his authoritative air, was pulled aside for a second screening. It was hilarious. The plaza itself was vast and grand, the architecture imposing under a brilliant blue sky. The wind, however, was brutal. They took the obligatory tourist photos, paid their respects at the monument, and then headed down. It was less about fun and more about a sense of patriotic duty. Sean said his parents had insisted he visit. The 4 young men, including one Bridgewater Fellow and one soon-to-be, left feeling edified and headed to Professor Reed's house, which was a short walk away. Leo was starving. The enhanced palate buff side effect was more potent than he'd anticipated. The hotel breakfast buffet had been a minefield of prefabricated food that, to his newly sensitive taste buds, tasted like reheated corpses. He'd barely eaten anything. A middle-aged woman, the housekeeper, let them in. Professor Reed, well aware of her own domestic limitations, had hired help. We're having Korean barbecue. I bought the lamb myself this morning, fresh from an organic farm, she announced. Dr. Croft was already there chopping chilies. I brought a fish, she said to Leo. You can steam it. Leo thought of his system skill. Advanced Culinary Proficiency Level 4. Steamed fish, permanent. Any fish you steam will reach the level of a master chef. He could almost taste it already. But when he entered the kitchen and saw the 20-pound grouper lying on the counter, he froze. If he hadn't just read that fish encyclopedia in the library, he wouldn't have even recognized it. A 20-pound fish was a monster. Steaming it would be an epic undertaking. Dr. Croft had really lost her mind. How much did this thing cost? I can steam it, he said. But do you have a steamer big enough for this? I do now, Professor Reed said. Your teacher is very serious when it comes to food. She brought one with her. Leo could only shake his head. And so, the work began. Alex peeled garlic, Jordan chatted with the professors, Sean filmed, the housekeeper prepped the barbecue ingredients, and Leo took charge of the fish. It was a good thing his strength had increased. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even been able to butcher it. Steaming a large fish was a completely different challenge from a small one. Timing was critical. He focused on the task, finding a deep satisfaction in the process. Sean filmed with artistic flair, even trying a shot from the fish's point of view as the knife came down. The kitchen in Professor Reed's Bridgeport brownstone was spacious and beautifully appointed, a world away from the faculty housing back at Northwood State. Through the window, you could even see a sliver of the monument they had just left. The shot of Leo, clad in a navy blue apron, expertly preparing the fish amidst clouds of steam, was pure cinema. By the time the fish was done, the tabletop grill was sizzling with fresh, high-quality lamb. The table was large enough for both. The meal was a perfect fusion of flavors. Professor Reed took the first bite of fish and smiled, her dentures gleaming. It was exquisite. Leo, with his enhanced palate, was in heaven. The fish was divine, and the lamb, seasoned with freshly ground pepper, was tender and sweet. He now understood the true misery of his buff side effect, but the upside was equally powerful. The meal was a joyous occasion, 3 generations enjoying a feast under the winter sun. Hick, hick, hick. Dr. Croft couldn't stop hiccuping. She had overeaten. Professor Reed, on the other hand, who had eaten just as much, was now serenely pacing around her spacious home, looking as energetic as ever. A house needs to be a little large, Professor Reed explained as she walked. Otherwise, on days when the wind is too strong to go out, you have nowhere to get your steps in. Dr. Croft's hiccups were a source of great embarrassment. She followed Professor Reed on her indoor constitutional. This, she thought, was why she didn't date younger men. The brutal contrast in vitality would be too much to bear. She'd be jealous. Her ex-husband had once told her she was too free-spirited to take care of herself, and it pained him too much to watch. So, he divorced her and went to take care of a younger woman. The truth was, she discovered he was having an emotional affair with a married coworker. As a fiery Texan, she couldn't stand hypocrisy. She'd given him all the cash, the car, and kept the paintings and the house, which was hers before the marriage. She'd rather lose the money than put up with his nonsense. Her phone, sitting on the table, started ringing. Leo brought it to her. It was a call from the gallery. She answered, and as she listened, her jaw slowly dropped. Earlier that day, she'd instructed her staff to post an announcement that the auction would be ending early, urging bidders to be rational. Her intentions were good, but the effect was the opposite of what she'd intended. Dr. Croft, you're a marketing genius, the staffer on the phone exclaimed. That announcement you had us post. It worked like magic. The 4 paintings that had no bids suddenly have multiple offers. And the bidding on your main piece is insane. It's up to $2.2 million now. Your students' paintings are also climbing. Dr. Croft let out a huge, convulsive hiccup. This was going to be the death of her. The announcement had sparked a panic. Rumors started flying that a major collector was about to buy up the entire collection. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece before it was too late. The market had gone into a frenzy. The shock was so great that her hiccups finally stopped. After lunch, the group went their separate ways. Leo had a meeting with his godmother's family. Sean went back to the hotel to edit. Alex was off to visit his aunt. And Jordan, in his natural state, planned to spend the afternoon gaming. Leo's cousin Shelley had asked him to meet at the Bridgeport Biotech campus. He'd assumed it was near the main university, but Professor Reed informed him it was way out in the suburbs, in a town called Chesterfield, a good hour's drive away. He hailed a rideshare, a sleek Lucid Air, and settled in for the long trip, planning to nap. As he closed his eyes, the system's voice chimed. Host earnestly provided massage and conversation therapy for his mentor, inadvertently conducting a psychological counseling session. Reward. Intermediate item, advanced massage proficiency level 4, permanent. 3 sessions can treat basic strain injuries. Host earnestly cooked fish, successfully completing the challenge of steaming a fish over 20 lbs. Reward, olfactory enhancement buff, 3 days. You will now possess the sense of smell of a pig, which is highly developed and can detect things buried deep underground. The sense of smell of a pig, he thought, isn't it usually a dog? A quick search revealed that pigs' sense of smell is several times more sensitive than dogs, which is why they're used to find truffles, but their poor obedience and stamina make them unsuitable for police work. Pigs really limited their own career paths. He dozed off. When he opened his eyes again, the car was driving down a narrow road lined with tall trees. For a second, he had no idea where he was. Leo was a little nervous. The driver was even more antsy. Driving was a boring gig, stuck in the same position, stop-and-go traffic. The only thing that broke the monotony and relieved the stress was shooting the breeze with passengers. This kid seemed like a bright, energetic guy, and he'd gotten in at that address. His accent wasn't local, though. Maybe he had family there. The driver was curious, ready for a good chat. But the moment the kid got in, his head slumped to the side, and he was out cold. Young people these days, they can really sleep, the driver thought, listening to the even breathing. At a red light, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The kid was handsome, with full lips and a fair complexion. He even looked a little familiar. Was he giving a ride to a celebrity? He'd actually driven a few before. Stars were people, too, and they needed a ride sometimes. In the capital, especially downtown, the traffic was a nightmare. You couldn't drive everywhere. You'd never find parking. Of course, he wasn't talking about A-listers. They had their own drivers. But he'd picked up a few minor actors. They were more than halfway there when the passenger finally woke up. "Hey, driver, where are we now?" the kid asked. The driver perked up. The kid's voice was incredible. Maybe he really was a celebrity. He'd definitely have a killer singing voice. "Don't you worry, son. We're following the GPS. The main road was jammed, so it rerouted us this way. We professional drivers stick to the navigation unless you tell us otherwise." Leo looked out the window. The scenery was surprisingly beautiful. It was just after 2 in the afternoon, the sun hanging at an angle. They passed a dense patch of woods and then came upon a scattering of houses. For a second, he thought they'd driven out to the countryside. He hadn't realized a place as dense and expensive as the capital had such rustic corners. After passing through what looked like a small village, they merged back into a more urban area, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Even though the GPS showed they were on the right track, getting diverted onto an unfamiliar back road felt a little unsettling. A guy had to look out for himself, too. Leo considered his stats. His stamina was an 8, and his strength had improved, but if some psycho came at him with a bat, being a hexagonal warrior wouldn't mean a thing. 1, it might not take him down, but 2 or 3 definitely would. If he was really going to make it in the world, he needed to keep building up his physical stats. He hadn't had time for boxing lately. He should really get back to it. The driver was an extrovert. For the rest of the ride, he chatted nonstop, asking if Leo was visiting family. Leo said he was having dinner at his teacher's house. "Whoa," the driver exclaimed. "Your teacher must be a real big shot to live in that neighborhood. Seriously impressive." Leo didn't elaborate that his teacher was a world-renowned academic. He just smiled. He realized that with his old IQ, he would have spilled his entire life story by now. Where his grandparents retired, everything. He used to be unable to resist answering a question, and he was too awkward to lie. Now, he just smiled and nodded, which only encouraged the driver to talk more. "I used to deliver for DoorDash," the driver said. "On a good month, I could pull in almost $5,000. The money was insane back then, but my wife left me. Said I never had time for her. Anyone who's done deliveries knows the difference between 50 orders and 100 isn't double the pay. It's way more. You get peak time bonuses, completion rewards, bad weather subsidies. If I took half a day off, I'd lose more than 2/3 of my potential earnings. I had to grind." "That sounds tough," Leo said. "What happened then?" "She insisted on a divorce. I was broke, so there wasn't much to split, but our daughter was only 5. My ex didn't want to take her, and I couldn't bear to give her up, so I sent her back to my hometown for my parents to raise. Delivering was killing me, so I looked for something else. A buddy introduced me to driving for Uber. I'm a hard worker. I put in the hours, and my earnings started climbing. Now I go home every 2 months. I don't do a thing but spend 2 solid days with my kid, then I come back and drive." "That's great," Leo said. "You must really love her." The driver's voice cracked slightly. "One time, her teacher assigned an essay, my mom. She asked me why she didn't have a mom. I cried half the night, felt like such a failure. My ex-wife is heartless. Since the divorce, she hasn't come back to see our daughter. Not once." "Have you remarried?" "Nah, I'm not successful enough to drag someone else into my mess. My daughter's in middle school now. She's beautiful and so smart." He gestured to the rearview mirror. A small good luck charm was hanging from it, a photo of a little girl with pigtails and a brilliant smile tucked into the center. "Your daughter is beautiful. She looks like you." "You know it," the driver said, a hint of his old pride returning. "I was a real looker back in the day. Had girls chasing me all the time. Hey, we're almost there, about half a mile out. I'm ending the trip now. The rest of the way is on me." The driver cheerfully ended the ride on his app and dropped Leo right at the entrance. Leo thanked him and said goodbye. A short trip, a glimpse into a whole life. It left him feeling a bit somber. Life really wasn't easy for anyone. The wind whipped around him as he got out. The place looked like a massive industrial park. A large stone monument at the entrance was carved with the words, "The Montgomery Biotech Campus." Leo texted his cousin Shelley that he'd arrived. She told him to wait and that she'd come get him. A few minutes later, a vehicle that looked like a resort shuttle pulled up. A long-haired girl was sitting inside, wearing a short white puffer jacket, a fuzzy white bucket hat, and a pair of bold blue plaid pants. On her feet were what looked like fuzzy Louis Vuitton slippers. The white hat had a small logo on it, a heart connected to the letter. Just as he remembered, his cousin Shelley knew how to dress. Even in winter, her style was vibrant. The bright pants were a statement piece, hard to pull off, but on her, they just looked effortlessly cool and chic. "Get in." Shelley waved with a smile. She took in Leo's outfit, noticing he looked even more handsome than the last time she'd seen him. Her cousin Paige had mentioned that Leo had a girlfriend now and had started putting more effort into his appearance. Shelley could tell instantly that a girl had styled this outfit. It was well coordinated, with subtle details, like his socks matching the color of his shirt, the kind of thing most guys would never notice. It looked like a simple all-black ensemble, but it was full of clever touches that made it look expensive. Shelley thought she had gotten over a crush, that she was handling the whole older cousin role just fine. She'd even researched it, the whole suspension bridge effect, where danger makes you mistake adrenaline for love. She'd figure it would fade with time. But seeing him again, Shelley felt that jolt. He was just so handsome. It was like he lit up the world, and everyone else faded into shades of gray. The campus felt drab and colorless, but the moment she saw Leo, everything brightened, and her mood lifted instantly. Leo hopped in and sat next to her. There was a driver up front with a security guard in the passenger seat. He caught a faint medicinal smell. Is someone sick? He asked, a little concerned. You kind of smell like medicine. Shelley laughed. Nope. With my dad around, he makes us start taking preventative stuff 3 months before we could even think about getting sick. You came all this way. Don't you know what this place is? Leo shook his head obediently. He really didn't know this area at all. This is where you'll find major firms like Innovent Bio and Genentech, along with national pharmaceutical research institutes and medical device companies. It's a huge hub for biotech. Dad has shares in a few of the companies here, so we're on a tour. The campus was enormous. After driving for a while, they pulled up in front of a large factory building that smelled strongly of chemicals. As Leo moved to get out, the security guard from the front seat approached them. Due to corporate confidentiality policies, photography is not permitted during the tour. We appreciate your cooperation, he said politely, handing them 2 small red stickers. They read, Please, no photography or video. Do not remove. He instructed them to cover both the front and rear cameras on their phones. It all felt very professional and serious. Only then did Leo notice the same red stickers already covering the cameras on Shelley's phone. Walking inside, Leo ran into his godmother, Eleanor Shun. She was like an older, more elegant version of Paige. The resemblance was striking. A warm smile spread across Eleanor's face when she saw him, making her seem even gentler and more approachable. It had been a while since they'd last met, but there was no distance between them. She kept in touch with Leo's parents. Leo's father was an honest, earnest man, while his mother was warm and considerate, a natural caretaker. She had a wonderful relationship with her in-laws, the kind of universally loved sister-in-law who treated her husband's younger siblings like her own children. Dr. Shin also had siblings, but their relationship was horribly strained. It had been bad even before he married Eleanor, back when he hadn't yet developed any of his groundbreaking formulas. After finishing elementary school, a strange illness had afflicted his legs, leaving him unable to walk. He was practically paralyzed, forced to crawl. His parents had given up on him, handing him over to a distant great-aunt, a childless widow whose husband had passed away. If you want him, you can have him, they'd told her. You don't have kids, so if he lives, he's yours. We don't want him back. If he dies, it's his fate. He understood. They had a younger brother and sister to feed, clothe, and send to school. But being abandoned still felt like a knife to the heart. The widowed great-aunt raised him. She saved her own meager rations for him, brewing herbal medicines for him to soak his feet in every day, massaging his legs. In those days, even raising a healthy child was a struggle, let alone a disabled one. It would be a heavy burden, even now a lifelong commitment. Dr. Shin was bedridden for 3 years. When his legs finally recovered and he could stand again, his great-aunt sent him to school. She knew a little about herbs and supported them by gathering and selling them, even catching scorpions at night to sell for medicinal use. Life was brutally hard, but he made something of himself, more than any of his biological siblings. He got into a pharmaceutical university on a scholarship, graduated, and started working at a hospital. He met his wife and married her. After the wedding, Dr. Shun brought his great-aunt to live with them. She was a meticulously clean woman, only becoming a bit untidy in her final 2 weeks of life. She had watched Eleanor give birth and helped raise Shelley until she was 2. Then, she passed away from late-stage lung cancer. On her deathbed, barely able to speak, she had gripped Dr. Shin's hand and rasped, "My son. My son." Her eyes still filled with worry for her little granddaughter. She had never once argued with her daughter-in-law. Their relationship had been one of deep affection. Dr. Shin had wept uncontrollably. He chose a plot for her in the city cemetery so they could visit easily, honoring their bond as mother and son. After she was gone, Dr. Shin developed more formulas and started his pharmaceutical work, all of it rooted in the medical knowledge his great-aunt had shared with him during his childhood. That's when his biological parents and siblings crawled out of the woodwork. They caused scenes at his hospital, accusing him of being unfilial and neglecting them. If he hadn't already secured a stake in the company with his formulas, he might have lost his job. Later, they schemed to take advantage of the fact that he had no son, demanding he raise his brother's boy. "He's your own flesh and blood, your nephew," they argued. Closer than any outsider, Dr. Shin refused them all. As his status grew, they stopped making public scenes but started spreading vicious rumors about Eleanor, even wishing for her early death. They were more hateful than strangers. Seeing Dr. Shin become more and more successful with only a daughter to his name, knowing they couldn't get a piece of his fortune, filled them with resentment. They clung to the fantasy that he wouldn't leave his wealth to a daughter who had just married away. Surely, it should go to their sons. The news that Dr. Shun had adopted a young tourist as his godson sent them into a frenzy. They had his 80-year-old mother brought to the state capital to confront him. If his family had been normal people, he could have treated them like distant relatives. But they were just too bizarre. Perhaps when the parents abandoned a sick child, it had warped the others, making them ruthlessly competitive for resources and twisting their personalities. Initially, Eleanor hadn't felt any particularly strong connection to her new godson. She was grateful he had saved her daughter, but emotions tend to fade over time without new interactions. The gratitude for a life saved might feel profound at the moment, but years later, bringing it up can feel like an unwanted obligation. But Dr. Shun's toxic relatives provided the perfect contrast. They made her appreciate her godson more and more. Who said blood was everything? The man she called her husband had no blood relation to the great-aunt who raised him, yet they had cared for each other their whole lives. She raised him, and he saw her through to the end. Eleanor would rather give their money to a stranger than a single cent to that pack of vultures. Besides, her godson was truly exceptional. The relationship had started out of gratitude, but the more she saw of him, the more she liked him. She felt like they were the ones who had gotten the better end of the deal. None of the young men she knew could compare. Beyond his talent, he was loyal and had unimpeachable character. If you couldn't judge a person, you could judge them by their friends. He and his roommates had lived together for years without conflict, pushing each other to be better. That said everything. So many people put on a good face for outsiders, but couldn't get along with those closest to them. When Leo said he was coming to the capital for an art exhibition, Eleanor felt she had to support him at the start of his career. She told her husband to go buy one of his paintings. It was like a parent secretly buying product from their kid's first live stream. Dr. Shun was swamped with meetings, but he'd snuck out for a bit. He didn't see Leo, but he saw the art. He was particularly drawn to the painting titled The Stalwart. He recognized the subject, the young man who had been at the hospital for a few days with his mother. Dr. Shun had seen him a few times. Honestly, boys like that were rare back in the Northwest. Dark, skinny, tall with a bit of slouch and a lack of confidence in their eyes. But he had a high-bridged nose and deep, beautiful eyes. He might have been handsome as a boy, but he would age quickly. Dr. Shun wasn't one to feel pity for everyone he met. He'd seen too much life and death at the hospital. But this painting had practically reforged the boy's very soul. It was the same person, but his eyes were filled with an unshakable resolve. Boys like that weren't afraid of hardship, but they had no way out. They either repeated the impoverished lives of their ancestors or turned to crime. This painting captured him perfectly. His background was still one of poverty and struggle. The rolled-up cuffs, the frayed sleeves, the worn elbows, the calloused knuckles that spoke of hard labor. The boy in the painting looked like so many others Dr. Shun had seen, but his spirit was different. It reminded him of his younger self. Back then, all he thought about was how hard his great-aunt worked to raise him and send him to school. He had to study, succeed, and bring her to the city for a better life. While other students slacked off, dated, or traveled, he did nothing but study. He hadn't been handsome back then, just a quiet, skinny kid with his head buried in books. But his heart was full of love. His great-aunt had been so good to him, encouraging him, praising him, teaching him right from wrong, showing him how to identify medicinal herbs. His life was hard, but he was never short on love, and that's what kept him going. Back then, there were opportunities. For young people today, material conditions were better. At least they wouldn't starve, but real opportunities were scarcer. The painting captured the boy's fearless, solitary courage. It was stunning. The description next to the piece included a photo of the boy holding a camera, a beautiful echo of the painted scene. It was incredibly moving. Dr. Shun, a layman who had just rushed over between meetings, had waved his hand and added another $75,000 to his bid, bringing it to $150,000 to help boost his godson's career. The other two paintings were of girls, and with two powerful women already running his house, he didn't want another. A painting of a young man would add some much-needed masculine energy. Dr. Shun wasn't here today, though. He was still in meetings. Today's tour was for the family of an important shareholder, Eleanor, their daughter, and their godson. The hosts were quite curious. Dr. Shun was famously low maintenance. He only ever came for a tour once a year, and he never made a fuss like other shareholders, even though his stake in the company had only grown while others had been diluted. He was an incredibly discreet billionaire. They suspected he had more money than he knew what to do with. After all, he lived simply worked harder than any of his employees, and had only a wife and daughter to spend it on. And he kept developing new drug formulas. This company was just one of his many partnerships, but it was a nationally recognized R&D center, a key enterprise that often hosted important government officials. After the pandemic, the government's focus on pharmaceutical companies had intensified. Dr. Shun's unannounced visit happened to coincide with a tour by a government delegation. Luckily, the schedules could be adjusted to avoid any overlap. They would just host them in separate groups. Shelley looped her arm through her mother's. Leo greeted her politely. "It's good to see you, Eleanor. You look much more relaxed than last time. You have great color." Last time, Shelley scared the life out of me. My heart was pounding for days. Normally I'm fine. You look great, too. Come on, walk with your godmother for a bit. Eleanor took Leo's other arm. They looked like a real family. An employee led them into the facility for the tour. It was all technical, and as an outsider, Leo couldn't understand much. He could see, however, that the facilities were immaculate and the staff seemed content. A few large banners hung on the factory walls with slogans that felt very much of the capital. Enduring effort. Lasting impact. Dedicated service. It gave off a strange feeling, different from the cynical vibe of the sign that screamed, "The boss wants more free labor." The employees here seemed genuinely motivated. The benefits must have been good. The process was highly automated, with very few workers visible. They toured several buildings. As they were leaving one facility and heading to another, they passed a group of people coming the other way. Connor Brighton, accompanying the delegation as a senior aide, was walking behind his boss when he saw a familiar face. He'd just seen him, but Leo didn't seem to notice him. Connor quietly asked the staffer next to him who that was. The staffer answered honestly, "That's the family of one of our most important shareholders. They're here for a tour." The senior official turned to look at Connor. Connor smiled at his boss. "Just saw a friend of mine, sir." After the tour, Leo, his godmother, and Shelley were warmly invited to stay for dinner. It was just a casual meal in the corporate dining facility. It wouldn't do to just let a major shareholder leave without some form of hospitality, but it wouldn't be an extravagant affair stuffed with gifts. The invitation was part of the standard, proper protocol for corporate hosting. Connor Brighton's delegation was receiving the same treatment. Things were different now. Corporate entertainment had strict regulations. For example, if the rule was 4 dishes and a soup, that's all you could serve. But you could use the freshest organic ingredients and hire a nationally acclaimed chef who made 10 grand a month to cook simple cabbage and noodles. It all came down to how much thought a company put into it. The surface-level presentation had to be by the book. No vintage bourbon or king crab on the table. But it couldn't taste bad. Simple didn't have to mean bland. The dinner was in a private room in the cafeteria, which was also considered part of the tour, so Eleanor didn't rush to leave. The room was decorated in a modern style with traditional influences, clean and elegant without being cheap. Everyone knew that a purely traditional style, with its heavy mahogany furniture, screamed money. But the older officials they often hosted preferred it, and younger people didn't mind. So this was the compromise. A company that thrived in the capital had to be smart about these things, avoiding any obvious missteps. Walking through the main cafeteria, Leo saw what the employees were eating. The prices were incredibly reasonable. A huge, glistening slab of braised pork belly, easily a quarter pound, was just a few dollars. 3 of those in a downtown restaurant would run you $40. Sides were 50 cents, and soup was free. It looked better and cheaper than the food at Northwood State. More importantly, he could smell it, and it smelled incredible. Definitely not pre-packaged cafeteria slop. They entered the private room. A man and a woman from the company joined them to host. The meal was, as expected, not extravagant. For the 5 of them, there was a dish of braised local fish, stir-fried bok choy with gnocchi, herb tofu, beef stew, shredded chicken, and a mushroom consommé. For starches, there was rice and fresh pasta with pea shoots. Eleanor was from the South and preferred rice, but Shelley loved the pasta. Leo was a rice guy, too. In the end, the meal was surprisingly satisfying. The dishes looked simple, but they tasted amazing. The ingredients were clearly top-notch. A pharmaceutical company would have no problem sourcing pesticide-free produce. And the chef, Leo thought, had to be a master. They had elevated ordinary dishes to an art form. The gnocchi was fragrant and sweet, while the bok choy remained crisp and fresh. The small fish were tender, and the savory sauce was perfect over rice. That dish was high in purines, however, so the host must have noted that none of them looked like they suffered from gout. In fact, Connor Brighton's table wasn't served the same fish. Anyone who knew food knew that small, wild-caught fish were the most flavorful. The beef stew was likely a nod to their guest being from the Northwest, though the beef itself wasn't as good as what they were used to back home. But the potatoes were perfect, fluffy, and creamy, soaking up the rich sauce. The tofu had the firm, flavorful texture of old-fashioned, homemade tofu, and the shredded chicken was so good you wanted to order a portion to go. The mushroom consommé was especially impressive. It was a clear, light broth with a subtle sweetness, possibly infused with medicinal herbs. It was a far cry from the heavy, greasy soups served at most restaurants. This simple meal was deeply comforting, a product of immense skill and care. The delegation in the next room was also enjoying their dinner. After so many meals on the road, they crave home-style cooking, but not just any home cooking. This was expertly prepared, flavorful without being greasy. A satisfying meal could lift anyone's spirits. Just as they were finishing, there was a knock on the door. A staff member brought Connor Brighton over. Since they'd already seen each other, there was no point in being coy. Connor walked in, all confidence and charm. Leo was startled. What a coincidence to run into him here. He stood up to greet him. Connor, hey. Small world. It really is, Connor said. I'm here with my boss, surveying the market. I thought I saw you earlier, just wanted to come over and say hi. Leo introduced him to his family. This is a friend I met here in the capital, Connor Brighton. He's a childhood friend of my roommate's cousin. We met at the gallery. Connor's been great, even invited me to his friend's horse ranch in a few days. Connor greeted the women politely. A pleasure to meet you, ma'am. And you. Eleanor and Shelley responded with equal courtesy. He didn't stay long, explaining he had to get back to his party, but said he'd see Leo in a couple of days. After he left, Leo asked the staffer who they were. They're a federal delegation, here on an official inspection. He's the chief of staff for the senior official. A very important person. Leo didn't quite grasp the full meaning of that, but sounded impressive. Shelley, meanwhile, was curious about the horse ranch. You're not still scared, are you? You still want to go? Connor said it's his friend's private ranch, out in the suburbs. It should be safe. Want to come with me in 2 days? Shelley did want to go. She was a little scared, but she loved riding, and it had been a while. And she'd be with Leo. She turned to her mother, pleading. Eleanor couldn't refuse her daughter. You can go, but you stick with your cousin when you're riding. No running off on your own. Leo texted Connor to let him know his cousin would be joining them. Connor, of course, was delighted. As a government official, he had access to information. Already done a quick search on the company they were touring. He hadn't known before, but a little digging revealed the girl's true net worth. She probably didn't even know the extent of her father's holdings herself. She was a true golden phoenix. Dr. Shin was not just a brilliant doctor who had treated some of the country's top leaders. He was untouchable. As long as he didn't cause any trouble, no one would dare mess with him. At dinner, he'd heard the girl call Leo cousin and Leo call the older woman godmother. It was an adopted kinship, but the intimacy was unmistakable. In powerful families, this kind of bond was as strong as a marriage alliance. It wasn't a casual relationship. You don't bring someone on a private tour of your company just for fun. That would be flaunting wealth, an invitation for disaster. This connection was clearly something special. That afternoon, Alex went to visit his aunt at her large townhouse in Georgetown. He'd been there as a kid, but his memories were of a big, single-story house in the city, not nearly as impressive as his family's high-rise apartment. The townhouse felt more like a country home, with plenty of room to run around after dinner. He hadn't been back since he'd grown up. Coming here now, flashes of childhood memories returned. There was a large ceramic fishbowl in the courtyard, filled with water lilies and goldfish. He remembered leaning over the edge, mesmerized, until his cousin's grandfather had called him away. Looking at it now, he realized the fishbowl wasn't high at all. In his memory, he'd had to pull himself up on his tiptoes to see inside. It must have been so small back then. His cousin's grandfather seemed just as old as he remembered, as if time had stood still for him. His aunt, however, whom he saw every year, had aged noticeably. There was gray in her hair. She was thrilled to see him and had prepared a feast. The wind was blowing hard outside, so the old man was taking his walk indoors. For him, selling the house for millions was pointless. What would he do with the money? He only had a few years left. He was comfortable here. Old people liked to feel connected to the earth. High-rises made him feel ungrounded. His philosophy was similar to Professor Reed's. You need your own territory. If an old man falls while walking outside, young people are afraid to help, worried they'll be blamed. In his own home, the ground was level, the wind was calm, and life was good. The old man was fond of Alex. When compared to his own grandson, the difference was stark. His grandson was a disappointment, part of a steady decline from one generation to the next. The old man had a generous pension, and his son had a stable, if unremarkable, career. But his grandson worked in the private sector, a job his father had pulled strings to get him. He worried about the boy's future. What happens when you're 30 or 40 with a family to support and you can't compete with the younger, cheaper hires? In the old man's view, working for the government was the only truly stable path. His daughter-in-law's nephew, on the other hand, was solid. He looked reliable and sensible. Even as a child, he'd been a serious little boy, willing to chat with an old man. After all these years, the old man found that Alex's views were more mature than his own son's. The comparison was painful. No wonder his own family was declining while his daughter-in-law's was on the rise. Even though they were from a smaller city, the boy's manners and conversation spoke volumes about his upbringing. His aunt had a cook, but she helped in the kitchen herself. The meal was lavish surf, turf, and everything in between, including a steamed fish. It's not as good as Leo's, Alex thought, surprised. His aunt's cook was surely top-notch. The old man had a high pension. He could afford a good chef. The steamed fish Leo had made. It was so good that now this one tasted bland, a little fishy, the texture not quite right. The other dishes were fine, but the fish was a stark contrast. Was it because Dr. Shun's grouper was just that much better? That couldn't be it. This was also a type of grouper, and it certainly wasn't cheap. But Alex wasn't one to show his feelings. He had mastered the art of hiding his emotions. Only his closest friends could read him. He took a couple of bites of the fish without complaint. It wouldn't do to be a picky guest when his relatives had gone to so much trouble. Still, his mind was racing. Leo supposedly knew another powerful figure through Professor Hoffman, a retired but still influential man. Alex had thought Leo was just lucky, or that the professor simply liked him. Now he suspected there was more to it. That steamed fish alone was a power move. Alex considered himself fairly worldly, but he had never tasted anything like it. At the time, he thought it was just the good company that made it taste so good. But this meal proved otherwise. Leo's family was in the restaurant business. Maybe he'd inherited the talent from his father. It was possible. A great chef could win over anyone. What do you give a man who has everything? A perfect meal is always welcome. Yesterday, at dinner with his cousin's friend, Connor Brighton, Connor had tried to subtly probe him for information about Leo's background. Alex, with his 4 layers of thought for every word, was an impenetrable fortress. If Connor had asked Leo himself, or Sean, he would have gotten a straight answer. But he tried to be clever and ask Alex. Alex was a Bridgewater fellow. Confidentiality was his middle name. Jordan was just as slippery. He looked like a harmless teddy bear, but he was sharp as a tack, a master of changing the subject. The dinner was a resounding success, except for his poor cousin, Ryan, who was constantly being compared to the model child from out of town. The meal must have felt like a punch to the gut. To his credit, Alex praised his cousin at every opportunity. When Ryan mentioned he was working in an ad agency but really wanted to get into social media, his parents and grandfather, who had previously dismissed the idea, were skeptical. But Alex endorsed it. "That's a great idea," he said seriously. "It's a booming industry. You just need to find your niche." Ryan's eyes lit up. He looked at his parents. "See? You all said Alex has good judgment, and he thinks it's a good idea." Alex saw that his cousin was a good kid at heart, not a spoiled brat, just a bit naive and rebellious. Seeing that his aunt and uncle were interested, he elaborated. "My roommates have a social media account that's doing really well. They got over 1 million followers in a little over a month. They haven't taken any sponsorships yet, but they got a publicity grant from the university, a few thousand a month, plus they're in the TikTok Creator Fund. For college students, that's pretty amazing." The old man nodded. If the university was funding it, it must be legitimate. Alex's uncle, a mild-mannered man who had the soul of a poet, poured his nephew another drink. It was his gentle nature that had led him to let his son study abroad. He was a man who'd been dealt a good hand, but had played it safe, ending up as a deputy director at the Social Security Administration. For someone with his personality, that was already a major achievement. "That's impressive," Ryan said, a look of envy on his face. "I talked to my colleagues, and they said that account's growth is insane. They think it's on track to be a massive channel, as long as they keep it up." "See, college students are doing it," Alex said. "So, if you really want to do it, you don't have to quit your job right away. You can do it on the side. Think about what advantages you have that other people don't." His family all agreed with this sensible approach. Ryan frowned. "I actually made a couple of videos already. I thought being a student who studied abroad would be a good angle, but nobody watched. I guess there are too many of us now." His father poured him another glass of the old man's prized Pappy Van Winkle. The old man didn't object, probably because Alex was family. The bourbon was incredible, thick and fragrant. At his aunt's house, Alex found himself talking more than usual. "You have a ton of advantages," he said. For starters, you live in a Georgetown townhouse. You could start by filming your life here. Before he could finish, Ryan interrupted. No way, man. PBS has done tons of documentaries on these houses, and nobody watches them. Alex smiled. His cousin was so young, so impatient. Of course no one watches if you film it like a PBS documentary. You can't compete with their production quality. But do the people at PBS actually live in a Georgetown townhouse? No, you do. You can film your everyday life here. It needs to be authentic. The audience for social media is regular people. The setting can be aspirational. Everyone's curious about a house like this. But if you show the down-to-earth side of it, you create a powerful contrast. Film the real life of a young person in a historic D.C. home. The more genuine, the better. Think about it. When you tell people you live here, aren't they curious? They want to hear the gossip. You just have to film what you'd normally tell them. Satisfy their curiosity. You don't have to worry about money right now. So just focus on making good content and building an audience. Once you have that, you can think about monetization. Alex's words seemed to calm his cousin down. Ryan started thinking, and the more he thought, the more excited he got, ready to start filming right then. Old Mr. Han nodded in approval. At least this sounded like a plan. His grandson's other friends just talked about selling the townhouse for millions to invest in some harebrained scheme. Wanted to sell off the family legacy before you even have a plan? That was the mark of a true failure. The family still had money, but the old man worried about his grandson's future. They wouldn't be around forever to look after him. Ryan's father, a bit tipsy, raised his glass to Alex. Well said. Ryan, you should learn from your cousin. Your friend is here too, Alex, his aunt said. You should bring him over for dinner one day. I'll cook for you. Ryan, the old man declared. For the next few days, you stick with your cousin. Didn't we just buy you that car? You can be his driver. Show him around the capital. Your job can spare you for a few days. Ryan Hahn just stared. Since his uncle was a man of arts and letters, Alex spent some time talking about his roommate's art exhibition. His uncle got so excited that the deputy director considered skipping work the next day to go see it. Alex sighed internally, feeling a pang of sympathy for the old man. No wonder he looked so old a decade ago. He must have the patience of a saint. It was a good thing his uncle wasn't in a more powerful position. He'd be an easy target for anyone looking to bribe an official with a rare painting or a book of poetry. When it was time to leave, Ryan was supposed to drive, but he'd been drinking. With a flash of common sense, he called an Uber for Alex and sent him a screenshot of the driver's details. Alex looked at the screen. Of course, only in the capital. For the first time, he saw a driver's profile with a special red tag next to his name. A small American flag icon with the word veteran next to it. An immediate sense of security washed over him. Curious, he scrolled through the driver's reviews on his cousin's phone. They were glowing. Traffic was awful, almost missed my train, but the driver knew a shortcut and got me there just in time. Thank you. I called this car for my dad, and he had a heart attack on the way. The driver had aspirin in his first aid kit and got him to the hospital immediately. So grateful. The car was spotless, and the driver was very professional. It was pouring rain, and the driver got out with an umbrella to walk me to the door. So thoughtful. A solid wall of 5-star reviews. When Alex got in, the car was indeed immaculate, with no trace of cigarette smoke, just a pleasant, faint scent of osmanthus. The driver, a former soldier, was a man of few words, but had a calm and steady demeanor. Even when they hit a patch of traffic near the hotel, a 2-mile stretch that took 20 minutes, he remained completely unfazed, his driving smooth and controlled. Feeling the effects of the bourbon, Alex was in a talkative mood. Driving the capital must be something else, he commented. It's good, the driver replied. I get to see every street, every corner of this city. I see our country thriving, and it makes me feel good. It's a decent job. I don't buy luxury goods, so it's enough to live on. I cook for myself, stay healthy. My friends back home are envious that I drive here. When they visit, I give them a ride if I'm free. The conversation made the traffic jam bearable. When they reached the hotel, Alex felt a sense of respect for the cheerful, optimistic driver. I gave you a 5-star review, sir. Thank you for the ride. The driver smiled. Thank you, sir. Alex waved goodbye, a smile on his face. He liked being called sir. He got out and texted his roommates. Back at the hotel, on the first floor. Need me to bring anything up? Ryan Hahn, having also been drinking, didn't drive back to his apartment. He wasn't exactly self-sufficient. His salary barely covered rent, let alone living expenses. A young man from a Georgetown townhouse couldn't exactly move into a basement apartment. He rented a studio near his office, a tiny space with a kitchenette and a bathroom, which he still considered slumming it. But there was no way a recent graduate could afford even that on their own. He didn't like living at home. It felt too far from work, and he hated being nagged. But freedom came at the cost of good food, and he was starting to miss home-cooked meals. After taking a verbal beating all evening, his family surprisingly didn't continue their lecture after Alex left. Instead, they asked him for details about his cousin and his roommates. Every single one of them is a powerhouse, Ryan recalled. I thought Alex was impressive enough. A few years ago, when I was applying to study abroad, I tried to get him to come with me. He told me not to go, that the political climate was shifting and a foreign degree might disqualify me from top government jobs. And he was right. He also said I was wasting my dad's political connections. I didn't listen at the time. Mr. Mrs. Han, an old mister. Han stared at him. The little brat had never mentioned any of this. To think that another family child had that kind of foresight years ago. The old man felt a tightness in his chest and made a mental note to take his blood pressure medication. He thought his own son had been his greatest disappointment, but this grandson was a whole new level of frustrating. Ryan was oblivious to their expressions. The first time I picked them up, there were a lot of them, and they had a Nobel laureate with them. So two of the roommates and the professor took another car. I could only fit Alex and one of his roommates, Jordan, in my G-Wagon. Jordan's family owns a factory that makes those Allbirds shoes you bought, Mom. But he's super down to earth, not like a rich kid at all. He's chubby and friendly, really easy to talk to. His parents and grandfather exchanged weary glances. He was so busy showing off his new car that he didn't even bother to ask how many people needed a ride. Then there's Sean, the one who makes TikToks, Ryan continued. I think his family's probably just average. He dresses pretty simply, but he's incredible. He doesn't talk much, just films everything. His whole channel is just videos of his roommates' daily lives, and he has over 1 million followers. Every video goes viral. Ryan pulled up the TikTok account on his tablet. The latest video was about Leo's painting, The Stalwart. It started with the stunning photograph Leo had taken, a mirror to the painting, then showed the painting process, interspersed with casual conversation. The final shot was a powerful overlay of the man in the painting and a man in real life. The comments were exploding. OMG, the cameraman is finally on screen. I've been dying to see what he looks like. This painting is breathtaking. I don't know why, but seeing the real person and the painting together made me tear up. I'm crying over a TikTok. I'm straight, but I just stared at a painting of a dude for 3 minutes? This crew is insane. They could do anything. The Roommate Chronicles is the best channel. Mr. Hans silently took the tablet. The older family members gathered around, curious, and started scrolling through the account. And the last one, the most mysterious one, is Leo, Ryan said. The guy in the video. I was going to get Alex tickets to the exhibition, but good thing I didn't because Leo's work is in the exhibition. I saw it was trending yesterday. One of his paintings sold for millions. His professor is the dean of the Corcoran School of the Arts, and apparently he was the first American to win some kind of Nobel Prize for painting. And Leo is an assistant to that Nobel laureate. Anyway, he's the most impressive one, and that award-winning painting is a portrait of him. You get it if you met him. I don't know why, but when he talks, you just want to listen. And he's really handsome. Mr. Mrs. Han, an old mister. Han watched videos of these college students winning national scholarships, earning national professional titles, and being named honorary professors. They saw young men who worked out, studied hard, and carried themselves with an extraordinary, positive energy. And their own son? All he remembered was that the guy had a nice voice and was good-looking. Was there any hope for the Han family? Leo got back to the hotel a little after Alex. He hadn't had anything to drink. There was a strict no-alcohol policy during the workday for the officials, and serving them would have been a major misstep. After dinner, he dropped his godmother and Shelley off at their accommodations, a bed and breakfast converted from a historic townhouse near the Capitol. Leo had always found the idea of living in one of those old D.C. townhouses strange, but this one was different. It had been renovated for modern convenience, so guests didn't have to leave their rooms to use the bathroom. He looked it up in the car. Though it was a B&B, it was more expensive than a 5-star hotel, over $500 a night. They were likely staying there, so Dr. Chen could easily pop over between his meetings. When they arrived, his godmother went to freshen up, and Shelley gave him a tour. Their suite even had a dedicated tea room. It felt more like a home than a hotel, with a large common area and separate bedrooms. "Want me to make you some tea?" Leo offered. Shelley's eyes sparkled as she nodded. She loved tea. At home, they had a massive tea room with a 10-foot-long tea table that had been so big they'd had to hire 8 men to carry it up the stairs, costing them a few $100s in labor fees alone. She'd picked up the habit from a roommate in college, and it had spread through her family. Now, There was a tea set in every corner of their house. Dr. Shun, however, secretly found tea bitter. He'd tasted enough bitter medicines in his life. In his old age, he craved something sweet. But he'd always force down the bitter brews his daughter made, smile, and praise the sweet aftertaste. Tonight, Dr. Shun had snuck out after his meetings wrapped up. He couldn't stand being alone in his hotel when his wife and daughter were nearby. He was technically just a participant in the conference, a specialist there to consult with some of the older leaders he'd treated over the years. They trusted him. His record was impeccable, raised by a widow, honest and brilliant. He told patients the truth, good or bad, which they appreciated. And his medical ethics were beyond reproach. No one could bribe him for information about his high-profile patients. What could they offer a man who held the patents to so many valuable drugs? His real work was these private consultations. The conference itself was just background noise to him. He'd sit there looking attentive, but his mind would be reciting the latest edition of the Herbal Compendium. He still preferred to take notes by hand. Finding the voice recorder's daughter gave him too complicated. Leo knew his god family would be in the capital, so he had brought gifts for them, a selection of very special teas. He'd carefully curated a gift box containing 2 single-serving packets of the award-winning Dragon's Robe tea, 2 of the Summit of Snows, and 2 of the wild tea from Judge Cole. It was a collection that would be nearly impossible to replicate. He also included a tin of Lapsang Sochong he'd had Joy Run help him select, a smooth, fragrant tea perfect for daily drinking. Dr. Shin was about to protest that drinking tea so late would keep them up all night, but seeing the excitement on his wife and daughter's faces, he held his tongue. Leo presented the gift box, explaining the origin of each tea without a hint of showing off. Dr. Shun, who had been planning to just have a polite sip, found himself intrigued. The Dragon's Robe was the prize from an international competition. The Summit of Snows was a gift from a Japanese tea master, the same one served to the emperor. And the wild tea came from Judge Cole, the powerful man who had helped get his own herbal formula into production. The provenance of these teas was truly top tier. The Lapsang Sochong alone retailed for over $100 an ounce. As Leo was explaining, the system's mechanical voice sounded in his mind. Host has calmly enjoyed a simple meal without being swayed by the status of his company. He has maintained a grounded attitude and passed an intermediate trial. Reward: Advanced Tea Ceremony Proficiency Level 4, Permanent. With this skill, the tea you brew will cleanse the drinker's mind and refresh their spirit, enhancing the unique properties of each tea. That was a trial? Leo thought. What does my godfather's wealth have to do with me? Anyone with a clear head would think the same thing. That was way too easy. He paused, then asked which tea they'd like to try. Dr. Shun, curious about the Japanese tea, chose the Summit of Snows. Leo prepared the tea, taking a photo of the leaves and the townhouse courtyard to send to Mr. Mikami, who he knew appreciated such things. Mr. Mikami had given him tips on how to brew this particular tea. Don't touch the leaves with your hands. Use water between 185 and 195 degrees Fahrenheit, and be mindful of the environment. He felt a new sense of anticipation. Last time, he needed the Zen mind buff to reach this level of skill. Now it was permanent. The system had gotten more generous since its upgrade. He tasted the bottled water they had, aqua, panna. It was good, with a hint of sweetness. He heated it, rinsed the tea set, and carefully measured out 6 grams of leaves into the warmed brewing vessel. He covered it, shook it gently 3 times, then lifted the lid to inhale the dry aroma. It had a faint, pleasant medicinal scent. He passed the vessel to Shelley, then Eleanor, then Dr. Shun. Shelley found the aroma rich and unique. Eleanor passed it to her husband. Dr. Shun, the physician, examined the leaves. They had been processed with a low-heat pan-frying and sun-drying method, preserving the fine hairs on the leaves. It wasn't a traditional tea plant. It had likely been grafted or was a unique cultivar. The leaves were thick and broad, characteristic of a plant grown at high altitude in a cold climate. Next, he rinsed the leaves, discarding the first infusion. He swirled the serving pitcher to cool it, then passed it around again for them to appreciate the cold fragrance. This time, Shelley smelled a rich fruitiness layered over the medicinal notes. Eleanor found this aroma even more pleasant. For Dr. Shun, the medicinal scent was more pronounced. Leo began the formal brewing, his movements fluid and precise. He was completely absorbed in the process. The first infusion yielded exactly 4 small cups, not a drop more. Dr. Shun couldn't help but nod in approval. The boy had the steady hands of a pharmacist. Leo took a sip, letting the tea roll over his tongue. The difference from his previous attempts was stark. The liquid was smooth and refreshing. As it went down, a warmth spread through his stomach, a rising energy, much like the feeling of drinking a very old, fine bourbon. The tea seemed to seep into his very bloodstream, opening his pores until he felt a light sheen of sweat on his skin. He continued with the third and fourth infusions. By now, his audience was captivated, sipping in focused silence. By the fifth infusion, which he steeped a little longer, the tea had a hint of bitterness, signaling its peak had passed. When they finished, Dr. Shun felt as if he had just stepped out of sauna, utterly refreshed. He loved the feeling but hated the hassle. Eleanor, who couldn't use saunas because of a heart condition, felt a tightness in her chest release. The constant fatigue she lived with seemed to melt away. Shelley's transformation was even more dramatic. She had been up all night, too excited about seeing Leo to sleep, but after a few cups of tea, she felt energized enough to go dancing. Dr. Shun was amazed. Could this Japanese tea really be so potent? As a doctor, he was acutely aware of the changes in his own body. Leo didn't brew anymore. It was getting late, and he had a long ride back. He said his goodbyes, agreeing to meet them at the exhibition the next day if they wanted to come. After the tea, he felt invigorated and clear-headed. After he left, the three of them talked. Stephen, Eleanor said to her husband, "That tea felt just like when I take your herbal tonics. The tightness in my heart is gone. I feel so much lighter." For the first time, Dr. Shun thought tea actually tasted good. Maybe it was her daughter's brewing that was the problem all along? He wondered. That night, he slept like a log. He usually had trouble sleeping away from home, but tonight, he slept straight through until morning. Eleanor, whose heart condition also affected her sleep, slept soundly as well. Shelley, too, had a perfect night's rest. The next morning, Shelley excitedly tried to brew the remaining leaves from the packet Leo had given them. She called her parents over, who were eagerly anticipating another rejuvenating experience. Shelley poured the tea. Dr. Shun took a sip, closed his eyes, and held his breath for a long moment before finally exhaling. It was incredibly bitter. Eleanor, more cautiously, took a small sip and grimaced. If she hadn't seen her daughter use the same tea from the same tin, she would have sworn it was different. But remembering its medicinal effects, she choked it down. They endured 6 infusions of painfully bitter tea. It had no effect. It was just bitter. It wasn't the tea. It was the person who brewed it. The night before, Dr. Shun had told his wife they should ask Leo for more of that tea to give to one of the old leaders he was treating. Now, he realized that was pointless. They didn't need the tea. They needed to bring the boy. Leo returned to the hotel, feeling refreshed and clear-headed. Alex had gone out and bought some late-night food from a Japanese grill, which they were eating in his room. All their rooms had been upgraded to the executive floor, but Alex's suite was clearly superior. It was a corner room, larger and with a better view, complete with a small sofa by the window. They'd rearranged the furniture to make a small dining area. The yakitori was a bit salty, and takeout was never as good as eating at the restaurant, but it hit the spot. Alex had even found a couple of beers in the mini-fridge. Leo picked out a skewer of shizumo, a small fish filled with roe. The outside was a little burnt and salty, but the roe inside was sweet and delicious. There were 3 skewers, and seeing how much he liked them, the others let him have them all. Leo found he didn't want anything else. The combination of his enhanced palate and sense of smell had a significant side effect. He had no tolerance for mediocre food. The beer, however, was cold and crisp, and it went down smoothly. Alex, who had already had bourbon, probably shouldn't have been mixing it with beer, but the good stuff didn't give him a hangover. He recounted his visit to his aunt's house, explaining that his cousin, Ryan, would likely be assigned to be their driver the next day. He wants to get into TikTok, so maybe you guys can give him some pointers, he said. Sean was curious. I thought you said his family has a huge townhouse in Georgetown, and his dad is a big shot official. Why does he want to be an influencer? Is it just a hobby? My cousin studied abroad, so it's hard for him to get a government job now, Alex explained. He's not making much in the private sector, and his grandfather won't let him start his own business. He's always been into photography, so just treat him like an apprentice. Don't worry about bossing him around. He might seem naive, but he's a good kid, not one of those spoiled brats. Sean shook his head. For the first time, he realized that rich people had problems too. Leo mentioned his own afternoon, visiting the biotech campus and running into Connor Brighton again. Alex grinned. He could just imagine the scenarios running through Connor's head. Leo's luck was unreal. Leo carefully ate the roe from the 3 fish. Just as they were finishing up, Alex, now officially drunk, leaned forward and asked, "If you kill yourself, are you the murderer or the victim?" That was their cue. They clean up the leftovers, and Leo and Sean headed back to their room. As they were leaving, Alex grabbed Leo's arm. "When my cousin gets here, I need you to be hard on him. That kid needs a good talking to. It's the only way he'll learn." "Do you have a grudge against your cousin or something?" Leo asked. "A little one," Alex slurred. "When we were kids, he followed me everywhere. One time, I was meeting this girl I liked at a bookstore, and he tagged along. He secretly put a frog in her backpack. She never spoke to me again after that." Leo, Jordan, and Sean exchanged a look. The girl must have been pretty for Alex to hold that grudge for so long. They'd have to remind him of this story in the morning. The next morning, Leo was up early for a run, fueled by a packet of honey dissolved in water. Sean was up too, but instead of editing, he decided to go for a walk and take in the capital's morning air. In the hotel gym, Leo spotted Dr. Croft. He had texted her the night before, telling her to meet him for a workout so he could give her a massage afterward. It was better before a meal, to avoid upsetting her stomach. Dr. Croft looked like a ghost, her eyes half closed. She'd seen the text and felt her heart sink. With her graduate assistant not around, she'd hoped to sleep in. It was a well-known fact that artists who rise early probably never went to sleep. But she couldn't bring herself to flake on her student. So she'd set both the hotel alarm and her phone alarm to drag herself out of bed. She noticed a middle-aged man on a nearby treadmill, looking disturbingly fit in shorts and a polo shirt in the chilly gym. Doesn't he get cold? She wondered, instinctively choosing a machine in the far corner, away from him. She had an aversion to that particular brand of slick, corporate masculinity. It reminded her of her ex-husband and made her skin crawl. Leo came over to her treadmill. "You said it too slow, Professor. Let's just walk for a bit to warm up." He adjusted the speed. "Did you stretch yet?" "Not yet," she yawned. "Then let's stretch first." Leo's advanced massage proficiency included a deep knowledge of stretching. He guided her through a series of movements, focusing on her back and shoulders. "Okay, now bring this hand over your head." "Right, ow," she yelped as he gently pushed, pulling the muscle taut. But when he released it, the tension was gone. "You can do this one sitting in a chair," he said, showing her another stretch. "It'll take care of 80% of your neck problems." The man on the other treadmill watched them, a smug look on his face. He'd seen the young man running alone the past few days and had written him off as a simple jock. But now he saw the truth. The kid was a player just like him. He went after the young girls. This kid was targeting the older women. Disgraceful, he thought. So young and already trying to be a trophy husband. The world is going to hell. After stretching, they both started running. Leo set a brisk pace for himself while Dr. Croft kept to a slow jog. The feeling of a good run was exhilarating, like the time he'd seen Stella and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. The only downside was the stale, metallic smell of the gym. He missed running outside by the lake at Northwood on the red track of the athletic field under the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. After their run, Leo went with Dr. Croft back to her suite to give her the massage. Advanced massage proficiency. 3 sessions, and as long as she didn't overdo it, the effect should last a while. Today, his technique felt even more refined, more powerful. Dr. Croft wondered if it was because she had worked out first. When he hit a particularly painful pressure point where her neck met her shoulder, it felt like her head was going to explode. But afterward, it was as if he had drained all the excess fluid from her brain. Her mind felt clearer, sharper, like a cluttered room that had just been tidied. And when a human thinks, God laughs. Dr. Croft had a thought. "The auction closes at noon today," she said. "I'm planning a small reception this afternoon for the handover, and I've decided to donate half of the net proceeds. Other people donate to avoid taxes. I donate to avoid hospital bills. A psychic once told me I shouldn't have too much money on hand, or I'll find ways to lose it in a self-destructive manner." She was convinced the psychic was right. The last time her career had taken off, she discovered her husband's affair, and he'd taken every penny in the divorce. Every time she sold a major piece or got a promotion, she'd end up in the hospital. She was older now and had come to terms with it. Too much money was just a magnet for trouble. Her words tumbled out in a rush, her charming southern accent becoming more pronounced as she got excited. The total auction value for her paintings was approaching $15 million. After the gallery's commission and taxes, she'd probably clear around $9 million, so she planned to donate about $4.5 million. "I usually give to hospitals or schools in underserved areas," she explained. "You should think about donating some of your earnings too. You can write it off on your taxes. Otherwise, with your income this year, you're going to have a hefty tax bill. This way, you get the deduction, you do some good, and you help people. I can have my assistant calculate the optimal amount for you." Leo hadn't even considered that he was now in a position to owe more taxes. The idea of money he'd already received being clawed back by the government was a new one, but it also meant he was earning a lot. To be honest, the prices for his paintings still felt unreal, more like a publicity stunt than a fair value for his labor. He could understand Dr. Croft's work fetching millions. She was an established artist, but his own paintings were just riding her coattails. The money felt a bit unearned, since it wasn't in his pocket yet, and he didn't feel like he needed it. Donating some of it seemed like the right thing to do. Following his professor's lead couldn't be wrong. After the massage, Leo went back to his room to shower. The hotel offered laundry service, $10 for a shirt, $15 for a sweater, but none of them were that extravagant. Sean had been horrified by the price list. His own sweater had only cost $12. Washing would cost more than buying it. When Leo was dressed, Sean returned from his walk, his face red from the cold, but his eyes bright. I got some great shots of the city this morning. They'll be perfect for B-roll. Let's go get breakfast, Leo said. They knocked on the door across the hall. Jordan and Alex were ready. Alex looked sharp and composed, but the moment he saw Leo and Sean, they burst out laughing. He couldn't hold back a pained smile. Please, guys, stop. Jordan had clearly already given him a hard time. I have to be at the gallery all day, Leo said as they walked to the restaurant. Dr. Croft has some things planned. You guys can do your own thing if you want. I'll stick with you and film, Sean said. I was planning to go to the Wishing Shrine in Chinatown, Alex said. Jordan, you in? You guys go ahead, Leo said. That place is too powerful. You have to be careful what you wish for. He told them a story he'd seen on TikTok about a guy who wished his constantly fighting parents would stop arguing, and a week later his dad died in a car crash. The wish came true, just not in the way he'd intended. I know, Alex said. I'm not making a wish. I'm just going to light some incense. A freebie for the gods. They can't get mad about that, right? Sure, Jordan said. I'll go with you, Alex. I'm not particularly religious, but it can't hurt. At breakfast, Leo put his enhanced senses to good use, seeking out the hidden gems of the Ritz-Carlton buffet. He discovered a section of freshly made pastries that were divine, and some incredibly fresh scallops at the seafood bar. The milk was surprisingly rich and sweet. He gathered a plate of his findings for his roommates, who were getting tired of the same old options. After a delicious meal, they split up. Leo and Sean headed to the gallery. Looking at his paintings hanging in the center of the room, Leo felt a slight flush of embarrassment. The thought that they might one day hang in a museum was both thrilling and mortifying, a heavy weight of responsibility. He had just arrived when his phone rang. It was one of the gallery staff. Mr. Foster, the buyer of your painting, Dawnbreaker, has flown in from overseas and would like to meet you. Are you available? Leo was surprised and deeply curious. Who on earth had spent so much money on his painting? He agreed to the meeting. In the campus clinic, the forge drip ticked rhythmically, feeding fluid into a vein. Jessica Monroe stared at it, her mind blank. It was a gray, overcast day, and the room was filled with the sterile smell of disinfectant. She hadn't worn makeup since that day behind the old lecture hall, the day Leo had seen her at her absolute worst. Now, without it, she was almost unrecognizable. She was wrapped in her large, colorful shawl, layered over sweaters and a jacket. The fever had broken, but a hacking cough had taken its place, keeping her up all night and disturbing Stella's sleep as well. The campus doctor had given her some cough medicine and the $500 university health subsidy, meaning she'd actually made money from being sick. But the doctor had also warned her that her immune system was shot. During the day, the cough wasn't so bad, but she couldn't sleep. She just stared at the bag, drop after drop. She had seen the painting. Leo had told her he was using her as a model, and she'd brushed it off. He never sent her a picture, and she never asked for one. She felt too guilty to even have a normal conversation with him. She saw in the news. Big Data knew her secret. It relentlessly pushed articles about him into her feed, tracking her clicks and the long second she spent staring at his face. She saw the painting hanging in that beautiful gallery titled Dawnbreaker. The encyclopedia defined Dawnbreaker as the first light of morning, a symbol of hope. But all Jessica could hear was the word breaking. She knew exactly when he had conceived of this painting. In the alley behind that abandoned building, when he had witnessed her utter humiliation. It was a moment of profound shame, a scene she thought would ruin her if any of her classmates saw it. And he had. He had painted that moment, but he had painted it with such beauty. There was no shame in the portrait, only a unique, fragile strength. The moment she saw it, she understood Narcissus, falling in love with his own reflection. She thought the painting was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Even broken, even pathetic, she was beautiful. There was a painting of Stella in the exhibition too, but Jessica thought hers was better, more moving. In that moment, she knew he understood her. It wasn't just pity he saw her. In his painting, there was no self-loathing, no fear. There was only a girl surrounded by darkness, who was herself the light that would break it. If she had the money, she would have bought it, no matter the cost. Suddenly, she understood the frenzy of obsessive fans, the desperate, irrational love for a person shining on a stage. He was a star, and she was just a spectator in the dark. A door chimed, announcing a visitor. Stella walked in, carrying food from her assistant. Jessica had told her not to bother, but Stella had simply said, "It's no trouble. I don't like the cafeteria food either, and it's no fun to cook for one. You can keep me company." She had a way of helping that never felt like charity. It was a feast: pork rib soup, steamed fish, wild-caught shrimp, and Wagyu beef over fragrant rice. Jessica had never eaten so well, not even when she worked in high-end restaurants where the staff ate leftovers. The food was exquisite, and even with no appetite, she ate a surprising amount. But the more delicious the food, the more she suffered, especially after seeing that painting. If only she were a normal girl from a normal family. They didn't have to be rich. If she just had a family, she would have had the courage to tell him. She would have shouted it, "I like you." But in her life, she was just a clown, hiding behind thick makeup, trying so hard just to survive, and still falling short of ordinary. Her life was a mess, a pit of despair. Why did she have to reach for someone like him? She forced herself to eat more. She had to get better, get busy, stop thinking. She would never, ever do anything to hurt Stella. Not after she had brought her food when she was sick. A single meal was all it took to buy her loyalty. Her integrity was just that cheap. Leo was led to a private tea room in the hotel. A middle-aged woman was already waiting. The first thing he noticed was her impeccable figure, showcased by a well-fitting turtleneck sweater and a leather skirt. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, low ponytail, secured by a large pearl. A brown cashmere coat was draped over the chair next to her. She exuded an air of confidence and sophistication. Her shoes were bespoke, crafted from soft brown leather that molded perfectly to her feet, the kind of quiet luxury that cost more than most people's cars. As an artist who had been studying human anatomy, Leo noticed something else. Her face, while attractive, had the telltale signs of cosmetic surgery. The lines of her nose, the angle of her jaw, they were aesthetically pleasing but lacked the natural harmony of an unaltered face. As artist, I could see the subtle seams. He approached her and offered a greeting. "Hello, Ms. Julie? I'm the artist, The woman looked up, and her eyes widened in surprise. He was even more handsome in person than in his self-portrait, with a warm, approachable aura. "Hello," she said, her voice smooth. "I saw the promotion for your exhibition online and was captivated by your painting, Dawnbreaker. I had to come see it. If you don't mind my asking, what was the story behind this piece? Do you know the subject? Is she doing well now?" Leo didn't answer her question directly. "Ms. Zhu," he asked first, "what is your relationship to the person in the painting?" The woman, who had introduced herself as Julie, fell silent. She took a sip of her white tea, which cost $60 a cup, and frowned. It clearly wasn't to her liking. "The girl in the painting," she finally said, "I believe she is my daughter. After her father and I separated, I went to Taiwan, then Japan, and later to America. I now live in Singapore with my fourth husband." The old Leo might have heard a story of hardship in those words. But the new Leo, the artist, saw the bespoke shoes, the flawless tailoring, the life of leisure that had shaped her. This was a woman of immense privilege. And for a woman with such means to have a daughter she hadn't seen in years, only to resurface now because of a painting. It didn't add up. Julie opened her wallet, a rare shea-green Chanel piece, with a jewel-encrusted logo that probably cost more than a car. From it, she pulled a faded photograph. It showed a young woman holding a baby. The baby was laughing, her hands waving in the air. The young woman looked almost identical to Jessica, only younger, prettier, dressed in the now-dated fashion of a bygone era. Looking at the photo, Leo felt a profound sadness. It was hard to imagine that the girl in his painting, the girl in the clinic, had once been this happy, carefree child. She was struggling, Leo said, his voice soft. You could tell from the clothes she's wearing in the painting. The material isn't great, but she's an incredible person, better than most. A fast learner, a hard worker. She's strong, determined, resilient. She's really great. As Ms. Zhu listened, tears welled in her eyes and traced silent paths down her cheeks. Her makeup was waterproof, a testament to her composure. Not a single streak marred her face. It was an impossibly tidy display of grief. Leo remembered the last time he'd seen Paige Kennedy cry. A messy, chaotic affair that had left her looking like a raccoon, with mascara rivers carving canyons through her foundation. It was comical, but it was real. Ms. Zhu, on the other hand, felt unreal. She wept beautifully, her head tilted slightly to catch the light, the line of her spine elegant, her neck long and graceful like a swan's. Age hadn't diminished her poise. She looked like one of those influencers on TikTok, filming a tearful monologue about being betrayed by a boyfriend, crying just enough for the camera while perfectly articulating a numbered list of his transgressions before announcing their breakup and her renewed focus on her career. I'm entering my girl boss era, so please support me. Link in bio. This dress is only $69.98, perfect for all my fellow girl bosses. Leo offered a polite farewell, not wanting to linger. But as he turned to leave, he couldn't stop himself. You don't have to buy my painting, he said gently. I can have the auction house refund your deposit. It would be better if you just gave the money to your daughter directly. The moment the young painter was gone, Ms. Zhu's tears stopped as if on a switch. She delicately dabbed the corners of her eyes with a tissue. Such a young man, she thought, so burdened by his own morality. She must really like him. Leo left the private viewing room with a heavy feeling in his chest. It was hard to explain. He just knew that if Jessica saw her mother like this, she would break down completely. It wouldn't have mattered if he didn't know Jessica's story. But he remembered Jordan telling him about the time Jessica took a freelance translation gig for a Japanese company. During a factory tour, one of the managers had grabbed her hand, a slimy, inappropriate gesture. Instead of recoiling, she had gripped his hand back, her eyes wide with a look of such feigned, over-the-top eagerness that the man had snatched his hand away in fright. It sounded like a funny story, but what must a girl go through to develop reflexes like that? Forget it, Leo told himself, shaking his head to clear the strange thoughts. Mind your own business, and you'll live longer. If that woman really was Jessica's mother, then at least Jessica wouldn't have to work 3 jobs anymore. That had to be a good thing. A single one of that woman's designer handbags could probably pay for Jessica's entire college education and solve all her problems. He returned to the main exhibition hall to find his godmother, Grace Shun, and her daughter, Shelley, had arrived. Grace was chatting with Dr. Croft. Leo walked over to greet them, catching the end of Grace's sentence. And thank you again, Dr. Croft, for giving our Leo this incredible opportunity. Dr. Croft, unaccustomed to such polite and earnest parents, blushed slightly. Oh no, not at all. Leo's work is truly exceptional. It deserves to be seen. Leo felt a little embarrassed by the mutual praise. Hi, Godmom. Professor. Grace asked if he'd eaten breakfast, then mentioned that his godfather would probably be able to sneak away from his conference around noon, since the morning sessions were packed with senior officials. She asked if he was adjusting to the D.C. climate, followed by a stream of other small, thoughtful questions. She reminded him of his own mom. There were faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, and her elegant clothes felt lived in and real. She was exactly what a loving, concerned parent should look like. Leo stepped forward and linked his arm through hers, just as she had done with him at the biotech campus yesterday. It felt warm and familiar. The bond between people was a strange and wonderful thing. Standing there with Grace and Shelley, he felt like he was part of their family. Sean was still roaming the floor, camera in hand, and Leo flagged him down to take a group photo, followed by one with Dr. Croft. The gallery space was large and airy, the lighting expertly arranged not just to illuminate the art, but to make people look good. It was a basic requirement for any modern exhibition. Make sure the photos are Instagrammable. If people look good in their pictures, they'll post them, and that word-of-mouth marketing built on social trust is priceless. A short while later, Ms. Zhu reappeared in the gallery. She walked to the center of the room and studied the portrait of her daughter one last time, her gaze lingering on the other 2 paintings by M. As well. Classmates, probably, she thought. That other girl, the one with the stunningly innocent eyes, that must be the one he liked. She paused for a moment, then left without asking for her deposit back or saying another word. As she walked out, she saw the young artist with his family. He looked like a carefree kid who'd never known a day of hardship, a golden boy raised on sunshine and privilege, laughing brightly. It was for the best. For lunch, Leo joined Shelley, his godmother, Sean, and Dr. Croft at a nearby restaurant, with Grace insisting on treating everyone. Just as they were about to leave, Alex and Jordan returned, so Leo invited them along. They brought their designated driver, Alex's cousin, Ryan Hahn, and his G-Wagon. Grace had seamlessly slipped into her role. Our Leo this, our Leo that. Leo figured his own mom, with her constant "my Leo" refrain, must have rubbed off on her. Still, he was in his 20s. Being called by a diminutive nickname was mortifying. Ryan, the cousin, looked miserable. He'd been roped into being their chauffeur first thing in the morning. He thought his parents were just making polite conversation when they'd offered his services last night over drinks. But no, he'd spent the morning fighting D.C. traffic to take them to the Wishing Shrine in Chinatown, circling for what felt like an eternity to find parking. By the time he found a spot, they were already done and walking out. Then it was back to the hotel, and before he could even have a glass of water, they were heading out for lunch. He'd been about to tap out and go nap in his cousin's room, but then Alex mentioned his roommate's godmother was treating, and the restaurant was the Chamberlains. Ryan's exhaustion vanished. Wait, what? Your roommate's family background is what now? Isn't the Chamberlains booked out until next summer? Is he sure it's not some knockoff with the same name? His energy surged back. I'm in. Definitely in. The restaurant was only a couple of miles away and, miraculously, had its own private lot, a necessity when you only serve a handful of tables a night. Leo's group took a cab, while Ryan drove Alex and Jordan. Being from out of town, Leo had no idea how exclusive the place was, but Dr. Croft did. Any restaurant with that much hype in D.C. had to have a killer PR game. It was the kind of news that circulated easily in her professional circles. On the way over, Leo learned something else. It was his godfather who had bought Sean's portrait. He was finishing his meeting and would join them for lunch. So it was all family. Of course, Leo had wondered who would drop that kind of money on an unknown artist. The art world was notoriously difficult. Even the works of deceased masters were subject to speculative bubbles, let alone a newcomer. No matter how brilliant your technique, breaking into the market was nearly impossible without capital behind you. People were buying Dr. Croft's paintings as an investment, not purely out of appreciation. If they truly appreciated her work, they would have bought it when it was affordable. It was market economics, not art economics. Knowing his godfather was the buyer was a relief. At least the painting would stay in the family, and he'd get to see it again. But it also meant the money had nothing to do with the art itself. He could already feel the jealous glares from his peers. When they arrived, they were greeted by an elegant, historic mansion that looked like it belonged to a 19th century senator. In their group chat, Jordan had already messaged, "Dude, this place is impossible to get into. Your godmom is a certified badass." As they got out of the car, Leo sidled up to Shelley and whispered, "Don't tell me. Your family owns this place too." Shelley rolled her eyes playfully. "Get real. This is a historic landmark. You can't buy it. Dad knows one of the old-timers who pulled some strings to get us a reservation. They wanted to treat your professor to somewhere special." Shortly after Dr. Croft and the others were seated, Leo's godfather, Dr. Stephen Shun, arrived, slightly delayed by traffic. He was a compact man dressed in a traditional-style jacket, an American flag lapel pin still affixed to the collar from his conference. It wasn't an unusual sight in D.C., but it signaled a certain kind of official gravity. Dr. Shun immediately showered Dr. Croft with thanks, his gratitude sincere and earnest. He acted exactly like Leo's parent, which made Dr. Croft feel even more bashful. When she learned he was the director of a major university medical center and served as a private physician to high-ranking officials, she had a sudden realization. Of course, no wonder Leo's massage skills are so incredible. It's a family legacy. Leo overheard and just went with it. Some misunderstandings weren't worth correcting. Dr. Croft had always been drawn to Leo because of his looks and his raw talent, but seeing how deeply his family cared for and supported him added another layer. Any teacher knows the feeling. When you have a student you adore, it's immensely gratifying to see their parents are just as invested. It feels like a shared project. Conversely, when a favorite student's parents are neglectful, it's not that the teacher loves the student any less, but there's a sense of regret, of wasted potential. Given a single opportunity, a teacher is more likely to give it to the student with a strong support system because they know the family will help them see it through. The student without that backing might falter, and failure can crush a young person's spirit. Society allocates resources not to those who need them most, but to those best equipped to use them. Dr. Shun and his wife had met Leo's roommates before, so this second meeting felt like a reunion of old friends. He treated them all like his own kids. Only Ryan and Dr. Croft were new faces. When Ryan saw Dr. Shun rush in from his conference, he thought, holy crap. He knew about that conference. His own father hadn't been important enough to attend. Of course, his dad had spun it differently, bragging about how great it was to not be bogged down with endless meetings like the top brass. Freedom, his dad had called it. Old Mr. Han had just taken his birds for a walk, unable to listen to his son's nonsense. But anyone who could book this restaurant on short notice was on another level. Ryan had always thought of himself as the big shot D.C. kid, but here he was nothing. The Chamberlain's was a private kitchen. There were no menus. The server simply inquired about dietary restrictions and flavor preferences. Then the courses began to arrive, portioned for the table. Leo had another incredible meal. The capital really was the place for fine dining. The quality of the ingredients was astounding. He somehow found himself drinking the most amazing morel and country ham chowder he'd ever tasted. It was a specialty from the Appalachian region, made with spring morels, cured ham, and fresh pork belly. How they found morels this perfect out of season was a mystery. The broth was milky white and intensely savory, the saltiness of the ham balanced by the sweetness of the pork, while the earthy morels cut through the richness. It was a perfect symphony of flavors. Leo had 3 bowls. Another standout dish was the pan-seared pompano with a sweet wine reduction. The fish flaked apart like cloves of garlic, its slightly funky, savory taste demanding another bite of rice. There was a deceptively simple plate of spicy stir-fried wagyu, the beef impossibly tender and the heat clean and bright. Dr. Croft seemed particularly fond of that one. Then came the sautéed sweetbreads with a fiery chili relish, a dish Leo had never tried before. He'd only ever had grilled kidneys, where heavy seasoning masked any gaminess. To prepare such a delicate organ so perfectly, without a hint of off flavor, was a mark of true culinary mastery. The restaurant cuisine was a fusion of traditions, executed flawlessly. For dessert, they served delicate, flower-shaped fry pastries. They were soft yet crispy, oily but in the most satisfying way, the sweetness perfectly calibrated. It felt like eating the most decadent, crispy piece of fried batter imaginable. Then came the abalone, a single one as large as a bowl, presented like a porcupine with toothpicks sticking out of it. It was a cold dish. You used a toothpick to spear a slice of the chilled, marinated meat. It was tangy, spicy, and crunchy, a refreshing surprise. Even the tea was exceptional. For Leo, whose palate was now incredibly refined, to be impressed by tea was a rare thing. Once you've had the best, it's hard to go back. The braised pork knuckle was also a revelation, rich and flavorful without being greasy. Dr. Croft, a Texan with a love for spice, was in heaven. Several of the dishes had an authentic, potent heat that even she had to praise. The meal was a resounding success. As they were finishing up, Leo got a text from Connor Brighton. His sister, Maya, loved the exhibition so much she wanted to see it again. They were on their way over for a second look. In reality, Connor knew there was a closing ceremony that afternoon and was coming to show support. Leo replied, "Awesome, thanks for coming. We're just finishing lunch at the Chamberlain's. We'll head back soon." Connor stared at the message. The Chamberlain's? He wasn't even surprised anymore. A moment later, his feed lit up. Ryan Hahn was shamelessly posting pictures of the restaurant's entrance and every single dish. Connor shot him a quick text and got the scoop. Leo's godparents were treating Dr. Croft to lunch, and they'd picked the spot because it was close to the gallery. After lunch, they walked back. Dr. Croft had announced she was closing the auction early, which sent bidders into a frenzy. It was like the stock market surging right before a holiday weekend, creating a panic-driven rush to buy in at the peak, only to get slaughtered. Dr. Croft, who had a mystical streak, genuinely didn't want to fleece anyone. Her material needs were few. She'd be happy in a cabin in the woods as long as someone brought her food. So, she quietly moved the deadline up by half a day. She was the seller, and she was refusing to take any more money. Back at the hotel, they rested for a bit. Dr. Croft invited Shelley and Grace up to her suite. Leo took his godfather back to his and Sean's room. Dr. Shun surveyed the space. It was spotless for a room shared by 2 college guys. This was entirely thanks to Sean, who, unaccustomed to hotels, felt bad letting the staff clean up. Even though housekeeping would come, he'd made Leo's bed after he left, straightened the towels, and tidied the desk. Dr. Shun took the room's cleanliness as another sign of his godson's excellent character. Last night, his wife had suggested giving Leo another gift, and he'd been mulling it over. Money could corrupt anyone. He'd seen it tear his own family apart. Back in the room, Sean was already editing footage. Leo felt a bit awkward just sitting and chatting with his godfather. "Are you tired from all the meetings?" Leo asked. "I could give you a massage if you want." Dr. Sean almost laughed. "Kid, you're talking to the master." But the offer was sweet. It reminded him of his own daughter, who always offered him massages when she wanted allowance money or had done something wrong. Her clumsy hands usually just made things worse, but it was the thought that counted. He nodded gravely. not wanting to discourage the boy's kindness. I've been here before, he thought. I know the drill. Even if it hurts, I'll try not to scream. Back in Bridgeport, the lunch rush at Ray Foster's roadside trailer had died down. The owners of the neighboring shops, whose clothing boutiques and accessory stores were struggling in the weak economy, would often wander over to chat. Food was recession-proof. People might cut back on clothes, but they wouldn't skimp on a good meal. Ray's place had been slammed all morning, and the other owners were green with envy. Their business was only decent on weekends now. Ray, I'm telling you, your son's a big shot now. Why are you still running this place? Said the owner of the clothing shop next door. He'd always felt his location's feng shui was off and wanted to swap spots. If I were you, I'd close up shop and go live the good life with my kid. Ray just chuckled and didn't take the bait. Leo's mom, Tammy, had come to help with the lunch crowd and was cleaning up. She overheard the comment and replied, Ray and I have talked about it. Our son's success is his own. We're happy as long as we can take care of ourselves. He doesn't burden us, and we don't burden him. We're even. It's better that way. Tammy Foster was a handsome woman. She had the kind of strong, classic beauty that reminded people of an actress from an old martial arts film. You couldn't remember her name, but you knew she was a star. She had aged well, her face growing more striking over the years. When Leo had left for D.C., he'd asked if they wanted to close the trailer for a few days and come with him. They'd been tempted for a second, but quickly refused. They were still young and strong. It wasn't time for their child to support them. Besides, they'd only be in the way. Leo's godparents were there, and they were the ones with the connections to actually help. Tammy Foster wasn't a genius, but she possessed a sharp, small-town shrewdness. I'm entrusting my son to you. I'm hands-off. You can guide him however you see fit. She knew that by stepping back, she was allowing his godparents to step forward. Dr. Shun sat ramrod straight, worried the kid might accidentally dislocate something. Leo, however, was itching to practice his advanced massage proficiency. He wished he could get his hands on everyone. His roommates were too young and healthy to need it. He was already working on Dr. Croft, but you couldn't massage someone 3 times a day. And Professor Reed was a picture of health. She exercised, ate well, and had perfect posture. But his godfather had been sitting in conferences for days. A sore back was practically guaranteed. It had been over half an hour since lunch, so Leo activated the task, washed his hands, and got to work. When he worked on Dr. Croft, he used a towel, but it was thick and made it harder to feel the muscles. With Dr. Shun, he dispensed with the formality. He washed and dried his hands, rubbing his palms together until they were warm before starting. When a task was active, Leo was completely focused. The moment his hands touched Dr. Shun's shoulders, he could feel the knots of tension. Most right-handed people held their stress in their right shoulder from using a mouse or playing video games. But Dr. Shun's left shoulder was worse. He was probably left-handed. They say lefties are smarter. Leo didn't know about that, but he did know they tended to have fewer shoulder problems because the world is designed for right-handed people, forcing them to be more ambidextrous. As a renowned physician, Dr. Shun was a master of massage himself, a skill he'd honed out of necessity. After being paralyzed for 3 years, he taught himself to massage his own numb limbs slowly, painstakingly, until he could feel again, until he could stand. His skill, especially on the lower body, was unparalleled. He could never find a massage therapist who was his equal. Most were just going through the motions. He preferred his own qigong exercises. But traveling for a conference had disrupted his routine, and his body was feeling it. The moment Leo began, Dr. Shun drew a sharp breath. An expert knows an expert. He had braced himself for a clumsy, well-intentioned pummeling. But this was different. The pressure was precise, the pain radiating through his meridians in a way that was both agonizing and deeply satisfying. This wasn't just a massage, it was a targeted assault on every ounce of tension in his body. The kid was a prodigy. Dr. Shun, a man who had endured unimaginable pain to walk again, couldn't suppress a groan. It was the specific, exquisite pain of a problem being solved at its source. Leo worked on him for a full half hour, head to toe. Dr. Shun, who had initially intended to just get a shoulder rub, soon found himself lying face down on the bed. At one point, a small snore escaped his lips. The conference had been draining, trying to listen while mentally reviewing herbal formulas. The massage sent him into a deep slumber. He woke up feeling utterly refreshed, as if he'd caught up on years of lost sleep. He'd always been a light sleeper, a consequence of childhood malnutrition that had, as traditional medicine would say, weakened his spirit. But between last night's tea and today's massage, he felt like a young man again. How are you so good at this? Dr. Shin asked, stretching his limbs in amazement. Leo gave his standard answer. His grandmother was a head nurse, and he'd grown up hanging around the hospital's physical therapy department. Dr. Shin believed him. He knew medical genius could be found in the most unexpected places. He himself had learned from his great-aunt, an uncertified village herbalist. He'd spent years searching for an apprentice to pass his own knowledge to, but it was nearly impossible to find someone with the right blend of talent, dedication, and integrity. Most medical students were like AIs. They could recite every textbook, but couldn't truly heal a patient. But now, looking at Leo, Dr. Shun felt a surge of excitement. The formulas, the techniques he feared would be lost. He suddenly felt he had found his successor. Just then, a staffer from the gallery called to remind Leo he was needed on stage. As he headed downstairs, the system's mechanical voice chimed in his mind. Host demonstrated complete focus during the massage, achieving a state of perfect mind-hand-body unity. The service recipient was extremely satisfied and expressed a sincere desire to pass on his legacy. Reward: buff, enhanced memory, permanent, subject restricted. Initial restriction is set to medical knowledge. Unlocking all medical memory points will expand the range. The crowd for the closing ceremony was even larger than for the opening. The hotel, accustomed to the constant flow of conferences in the capital, handled it with practiced ease, seamlessly providing a grand, high-ceilinged hall. All the major bidders had been invited. Among them were a few genuine titans of industry, names from the Forbes list. Leo changed his clothes before going on stage. Stella had picked out all his outfits, and every single one was impeccable. She had chosen durable, high-quality pieces, not the fragile, single-use garments that some luxury brands passed off as art. Real high society, Leo was learning valued substance over flash. The details mattered. Even his socks were top of the line. Coincidentally, Cade was at a promotional event for a luxury brand in the mall directly across from the hotel. As one of the celebrity guests, he stood on a small stage, dressed in a sharp black suit and blue trousers. His 9 out of 10 looks even more striking in person. But the massive digital billboard on the mall's facade wasn't exclusively his. It cycled through advertisements, and the one for the art exhibition across the street seemed to be running on a longer, more expensive loop. And so, Cade saw him, the soft target he'd tried to bully, who had turned out to be anything but. Word gets around. Within days, Cade had learned that some lunatic had not only snatched his variety show spot over a few baseless rumors, but had also thrown an extra $30 million into director Hayes' production. $30 million. That was enough to cast a lead actor. And this person had done it for a bit player whose scenes were already wrapped. Cade's agent had read him the right act, and he'd backed down, but the grudge remained. He never thought he'd see the guy again, let alone right across the street. Cade's event was a simple grip and grin. Pose for photos, get a trending topic on social media, and collect a paycheck, most of which went to his agency. Their trainee contracts were notoriously predatory. Then he saw the prices on the screen. Leo's paintings. He was an actor, an extra, who was supposedly just getting an internship credit. And now he was a painter whose works were selling for millions? It had to be a scam. Money laundering, probably. Cade, with his legions of fans, received handmade bracelets that were worthless. And this nobody was selling a single painting for millions. It wasn't until the final prices were locked that Leo understood what had happened. In the final hours, bidders who had lost out on Dr. Croft's wildly expensive pieces had turned their attention to his. In for a penny, in for a pound, they figured and started throwing money at his work. The final tally was staggering. The artist, bought by Victoria Vance, went for $5 million. Dawnbreaker, purchased by Ms. Zhu, fetched $3 million. And the stalwart, to his godfather, sold for $2 million. $10 million. Leo suddenly understood the dazed, pained expression Dr. Croft always wore. This is insane. It's too much. He had planned to donate the proceeds, and now the number felt terrifyingly large. He was a college student who got excited about wheedling an extra $100 a month from his dad. Now he was staring at a figure with 7 digits. It was dizzying. At the ceremony, Dr. Croft announced she would be donating half of her net proceeds to charity. A gasp went through the room. They had all seen the final prices. The woman had just cleared a fortune in a single afternoon, and she was giving half of it away. But she was an artist, after all. Eccentricity was expected. Then it was Leo's turn. He stood beside his teacher, a handsome, clean-cut young man with an excellent, calming voice. The high-powered guests, content with their newly acquired assets, listened with amused indulgence. He had the kind of unself-conscious nobility that Real D. C. Kids like Connor Brighton, who were raised knowing their own importance, could never quite achieve. Leo, still at his core, saw himself as just a regular college kid, and that gave him a powerful, disarming charisma. He spoke without a stutter, thanking Dr. Croft and the patrons. He talked about his inspiration for the stalwart, his favorite of the three. He spoke of its vitality, its spirit, and praised the subject, his roommate Sean, telling a short, sweet story about their trip to Sean's hometown. The audience found him charmingly earnest. Then, as he reached his conclusion, his tone shifted. "And so," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I would like to donate the entirety of my net proceed from this auction. I want to designate the funds for two specific purposes: to purchase new dialysis equipment for the Kangxi County Hospital and to improve the room and board conditions for the teachers and students at Kangxi County High School." The room was silent for a beat. Then, it exploded with thunderous applause. The event was being live-streamed. Across the street, Cade was having an $8 million necklace carefully draped around his neck for a photo op. At that exact moment, the gentle, steady voice from the billboard echoed through the plaza, announcing a $10 million donation. Sean blended in perfectly with the press corps. Dressed in dark, practical clothes, he looked like any other workhorse photographer, a little scruffy compared to the glitzy attendees, but that was the uniform. Photography was hard, physical work, lugging gear, fighting for angles, lying on the ground for the perfect shot. The camera, weighing over 10 pounds, was a constant companion. He was in his element here. Behind the lens, the world was quiet, orderly. He didn't have to make small talk or navigate awkward social cues. He was confident. He loved the portrait Leo had painted of him, but the thought of being the center of attention made his skin crawl. He moved through the crowd, capturing candid moments, the expressions of people viewing Leo's work, the ambient energy of the room. When Leo took the stage, Sean, with the practiced aggression of a seasoned pro, shouldered his way to the front for a clear shot. Seeing his roommate up there, bathed in the stage lights, Sean couldn't help but smile. He felt a swell of vicarious pride. He had documented Leo's journey, and it was deeply moving. He listened as Leo spoke, his voice clear and confident, and chuckled along with the crowd when Leo mentioned him. His eyes started to feel moist, but he blamed it on the harsh lighting. But when Leo announced he was donating all $10 million, specifically to Kangxi County, to the hospital, to the school, Sean froze. The camera felt heavy in his hands. His jaw dropped, and a tear rolled down his cheek, blurring the viewfinder. $10 million. It was more money than Sean could ever dream of earning in his lifetime. And Leo was just giving it away. If he had donated it to some generic foundation, Sean would have called him an idiot. He knew Leo's family wasn't rich. They were a comfortable, middle-class family, just like his, only a little better off. Let the billionaires donate to charity. Why was Leo playing the hero? Sean, who had known poverty, valued every single dollar. But Leo hadn't just donated it. He had sent it home, to Kangxi County, to Sean's home. It was a remote, forgotten place that had no connection to Leo whatsoever, except for him. Sean wanted to scream at him, to call him a fool, but the words caught in his throat. His chest felt tight, hot, and full. It was one thing to support a cause from a distance. It was another to bring it home. If the donation was for someone else, Sean would have called Leo a saint. Since it was for him, he just felt he was a lucky idiot. He wiped the eyepiece of his camera with the inside of his shirt and kept shooting. The applause was deafening. Alex and Jordan were on their feet, clapping wildly. Alex is intelligently, a polite smile on her face. She was here to see the portrait of her daughter and, incidentally, the boy who painted it. She had seen him perform once before and had been mildly impressed. She hadn't thought he was handsome then, just a good singer. Now, she could see the appeal. He was the kind of handsome that grew on you. She was starting to understand why her daughter, who had sworn off boys, had fallen for him. As someone who genuinely loved and understood art, she knew a painting was a form of self-revelation. And looking at his work, she didn't sense any ulterior motives toward Stella. The money, however, was another matter. $5 million. It irked her to give that much to the boy her daughter liked. It felt like funding the enemy. But then he turned around and given it all away, treating it like dirt. It was more cavalier than even his bohemian teacher, Dr. Croft. Victoria was for once at a loss. For Ms. Zhu, who was busy networking, the announcement was even more jarring. She had known poverty, wealth, and ruin. She had fought her way back from nothing. She was a smart woman. But as she listened to the young man on stage calmly give away a fortune to some remote county in the West, her first reaction was a flash of anger. What a waste. She forced a smile and joined the applause. Leo's godparents were also in the crowd. Dr. Shun had come to support his godson, prepared to bid up to $2 million on his painting just to make sure it sold, and the boy wasn't embarrassed. When he heard Leo's announcement, donating the money to a place so similar to his own impoverished hometown, he was profoundly moved. He himself had anonymously donated millions to his own county over the years. He knew Leo's family background. Good, honest people. He watched the young man on stage, poised and clear-eyed. He leaned over to his wife. "You know how you wanted to give your godson something?" he whispered. "Let's just sign over the Bethesda condo to him. It's a good location, close to the universities and his professor. If he decides to come to the capital for graduate school, he'll have a place to stay." When Leo started his speech, Dr. Croft had slipped backstage for a drink of water. The stage lights felt like tiny suns boring into her skull, and she was feeling parched. She wasn't nervous. Her artistic temperament had transcended such mundane emotions. She was taking a sip when she heard Leo's closing line. She choked, spraying water everywhere. Good heavens. The kid's even more radical than I am. Artists are said to treat money like dirt, either because they have none or because it comes to them as easily as breathing. Dr. Croft had experienced both extremes. She had a healthy detachment from wealth. But for a young man like Leo to have such conviction was something else entirely. She was, at her core, a pure and sincere person, and she suddenly understood why she had been so drawn to him from the start. It wasn't just his looks. It was a meeting of kindred spirits. She took another gulp of water and returned to the stage for her closing remarks, which were characteristically brief. "Thank you to all my patrons for your support," she said with a grin. "I won't be producing any new work for a while. I'm off to be a patient." A wave of cheerful laughter rippled through the hall. For collectors, a less prolific artist was a good investment. The ceremony was refreshingly efficient. Initially, the crowd had thought the young painter was just sharing his artistic process. They soon realized he was making a profound statement. Many of the collectors, who had come for Dr. Croft, now looked at Leo with new eyes. He was the boy from her award-winning painting, Impossibly Handsome, and now, a compelling story in his own right. To invest in a newcomer was risky, but this kid was different. He just created a media narrative that money couldn't buy. Leo felt a pang of regret as he walked off stage, but it was fleeting. The money had never felt real, so giving it away didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. And if it could genuinely help people, it was worth it. His godparents would surely approve. Victoria Vance, "It was your money to do with as you please." Dr. Shun, "My son has great integrity." Excellent. Ms. Zhu, "Performative nonsense." What a fool. He made a mental note to call his parents. This would definitely hit the news. But they were simple people. A number that big was just an abstraction to them. Before he even reached the bottom of the stage steps, the system's voice sounded in his head. Host has acquired a large sum of money for the first time and has chosen not to indulge in it, but to use it for a worthy cause. Host has demonstrated a correct value system and earned the 100% gratitude of a roommate. Reward: buff, empathy, permanent, subject restricted. Host can now maximize the effects of the empathy buff when singing. Leo's mind went to a weird place. Is this why people in old folk songs and musicals just burst into song to express their feelings? He pictured himself in a scene from The Legend of the White Snake, breaking into an operatic tune to have a serious conversation. The image was so absurd he let out a small, amused smile. A photographer caught the moment. The young man's subtle, knowing smile became an iconic shot of the event. The ceremony ended. Alex, Jordan, and the others swarmed him. "Leo, man, that was... wow," Alex said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Your political instincts are off the charts. We need to get you into the Bridgewater Fellowship. A fast-track admission." Jordan just shook his head. "Dude, I'm officially your follower." Sean pushed through the crowd, his camera lowered. 1,000 words were stuck in his throat. All he could manage was, "Thank you, Leo." Ryan Hahn, the cousin, was buzzing. Dude, that was so badass." He saw the perpetually unimpressed Connor Brighton approach Leo and engage him in a polite, respectful conversation. This was his chance. He squeezed his way in. "Brothers, my treat tonight, drinks at the Georgetown waterfront. There's a live band, a famous one. Who's in?" Connor Brighton winced internally at Ryan Hahn's suggestion. The Hahn family really was in decline. Proposing a trip to the Georgetown waterfront in this context? Had he learned nothing during his years abroad? All the cool kids went to clubs at the wharf or in Adamo now. The waterfront was for tourists and middle-aged people on dates. Someone like Leo wouldn't be caught dead in such a low-rent spot. But Leo and his friends were, in fact, tourists. They were kids from a university, so isolated it might as well have been a monastery. 4 years of clean living had turned even a factory owner's son like Jordan into a simple country boy. They had no idea where the cool spots in D.C. were. The Georgetown waterfront? Awesome. I've heard of it, came the enthusiastic replies. Ryan's suggestion was met with unanimous approval. Having feasted at lunch, no one was in the mood for another heavy meal. Leo's godparents headed back to their hotel, leaving Shelley to hang out with the younger crowd. Connor and his sister, Audrey, stayed as well. But Connor wasn't one to freeload. He smoothly took charge. The traffic over there is a nightmare, he said, overriding Ryan's offer of his G-Wagon. I'll arrange a car, and I know a great little barbecue spot in an alley nearby. We can grab a bite first. The bars won't get going for a while. While Ryan's suggestion had been a spur-of-the-moment whim, Connor executed it with flawless precision. He arranged everything with an understated competence that was far more impressive than flashy gestures. After bidding farewell to the adults, the group of young people piled into the car Connor had summoned. It dropped them off in a narrow, cobbled alley. Tucked away was a tiny, unassuming eatery. Inside, a young woman was folding wontons while an old man rhythmically pounded meat on a large stone block with a wooden mallet. The filling wasn't chopped. It was tenderized into a paste, a mixture of pork and fish. In the small courtyard, a massive, conical grill smoked gently. Connor greeted the old man and ordered for the table. It was the kind of hidden gem you'd never find on your own. In D.C., access wasn't about money. It was about connections. The prices on the single-page laminated menu were surprisingly cheap, cheaper even than the food back on campus. But without a reservation made through the right channels, you wouldn't get a table. Ryan launched into an enthusiastic explanation. This place is impossible to get into. Connor, you're the man. The old guy used to be a chef for some big-shot politician. Retired now, just makes the marinades. The barbecue here is legendary. Connor gave a modest smile. Ryan was a bit of a buffoon, but he made for a good hype man. The food came quickly. Bowls of steaming wontons, 6 large ones per person, followed by skewers of grilled meat and flatbread. The conical grill locked in the moisture, making the meat incredibly tender. The wontons were savory and springy. The barbecue was perfect, and the flatbread was fragrant and best eaten hot. Leo, with his enhanced senses, savored every bite. After dinner, Connor led them through a small back gate that opened directly onto the bustling riverfront, saving them a long walk. The Georgetown waterfront at night was a chaotic kaleidoscope of lights and sounds. Bars lined the river, their music bleeding into one another. Street vendors sold kebabs, cheap souvenirs, and flowers. It was a little grimy, but vibrant with life. Up ahead, a massive crowd had formed, blocking the path. Screams erupted from the center. Oh my God, you're so hot. Look over here. Please. It's the Starfall Trio. They're playing here tonight. I can't believe it. Starfall. Starfall. Leo and his friends exchanged blank looks. Only Jordan and Audrey seemed to know who they were. We're never getting in, Ryan said, dejected. Look at that crowd. Connor just smiled. Don't worry. I called ahead. The owner's holding a spot for us. He led them through the throng. The bar was packed, with people spilling out onto the street. The owner himself met them at the door and escorted them up to a private balcony on the second floor. It was the best seat in the house, a perfect view of the stage, the river, and the chaos below, all from a comfortable distance. On the stage, a handsome young man was singing while 2 others played instruments. You don't have to be the sun, you don't have to find the moon. Just let your own light slowly start to bloom. In the unfamiliar bar, they stuck to bottled beer. Cocktails were a minefield of unknown ingredients and potential price gouging. And hard liquor was out of the question. Better to play it safe. The 8 of them, Leo's crew of 4, Shelley, Ryan, Connor, and Audrey, made for a large group. Connor hadn't been to the waterfront in years. His circle preferred more exclusive, private clubs. In that sense, Ryan Hahn, who had never even been to those places, had already been cast out of their world. The bar's main draw was its large outdoor platform, which allowed the massive crowd to gather and watch. From their VIP balcony, they were insulated from the crush. The view wasn't spectacular, but the people watching was first-rate. Ryan leaned against the railing, beer in hand, looking perfectly content. Sean, after a quick glass of water, excused himself to go take some photos. Alex, ever the responsible one, nursed his drink, his glass half full of watermelon slices. Shelley was relaxed and happy, sitting next to Leo, who made sure she was included, passing her snacks and drinks. And Audrey Sia was practically vibrating with excitement, thrilled to be sitting across from her new idol. Ever since Leo's donation announcement, her affection score for him had shot up to 79, 1 point higher than her score for her own cousin, Connor. So our bond is purely genetic, huh? Connor thought wryly. Leo was the embodiment of every schoolgirl's fantasy. Talented, kind, handsome, and effortlessly charming. Meanwhile, Leo found himself seated between Alex and Connor, and the pressure was immense. It was like a kid accidentally sitting at the adult's table. Flanked by two polished, powerful young men, he felt a palpable aura of ambition. He would have much rather been leaning over the railing with Ryan and Jordan. But Connor seemed to be treating him with a strange, subtle deference, as if he constructed some elaborate backstory for Leo in his head. Leo took a sip of his Corona. The moment a boy starts to actually enjoy the taste of beer is perhaps a sign of maturity. Down below, the music was loud, but it didn't prevent conversation. This was Leo's first encounter with someone even more steeped in the culture of power than Alex. Connor, Leo asked, genuinely curious, how does a regular person become a senior national leader? Connor paused to consider the question. Is he interested in a political career? Is he just curious? Or is this a test? He decided how to answer. Alex leaned in, equally interested to hear what the D.C. insider had to say. All right, let's take us as an example, Connor began. You graduate college at 22 and pass the Foreign Service exam. You're in. A year later, you're a confirmed staffer. You're 23. You work your ass off, get noticed, and 3 years later, you land a job as a deputy chief of staff for a state assemblyman. You're 25. You excel, and 3 years after that, you run for and win a seat in the state legislature. You're 28. The next jump to a federal-level position is the hardest. You spend 7 years building a network, outmaneuvering thousands of other hopefuls, and finally get a junior cabinet appointment. You're 35. You're now a mid-level player, facing a whole new world of temptations and tests. You navigate them perfectly. There are about 600,000 people at your level nationwide. Only 1% of them will ever be considered for a promotion. But you're lucky. You have a powerful mentor. You don't make a single mistake. 9 years later, you're nominated to lead a federal agency. You're 44. Now you're competing against 100,000 peers for maybe 1,000 senior executive level spots. You have to beat 99,000 other agency heads, governors, and mayors to move up. But your luck holds, your mentor backs you, and you land a sub-cabinet level post. You've finally become one of the country's senior leaders. As for what comes after that, Connor smiled. That's a conversation for another time. Leo and Alex listened rapt. The path he laid out was a high-stakes game of chutes and ladders, where one misstep sent you back to the beginning. It was the fastest possible trajectory, a timeline Alex's own father had already fallen behind. Down below, a new singer took the stage, and the screams intensified. Audrey, bored by her cousin's political lecture, had joined Ryan at the railing. The dream you held at the very start, the place you want to be, how can you turn back when you're only halfway there? The three of them, Connor, Alex, and Leo, fell silent for a moment. Connor raised his glass. To our original dreams, he said. Alex clinked his glass against Connor's. To the dream. Leo smiled and touched his bottle to theirs. You guys go for it. I'll just be here to cheer you on when you make it. You guys can change the world, he thought. I'll be a trophy husband. The alcohol worked its magic, loosening tongues and bridging gaps. Alex, though usually reserved, had found a kindred spirit in Connor. They volleyed ideas back and forth, their conversation escalating in complexity. Leo, understanding very little, simply nodded earnestly, playing the part of the attentive listener. He felt completely out of his depth. His life experiences hadn't prepared him for this level of discourse. He was relegated to the role of bartender, refilling their glasses. Finally, needing a break from the heady political talk, he stood up and walked to the railing. He snapped a picture of the vibrant scene below and sent it to Stella. He thought about telling Jessica about the woman claiming to be her mother, but decided against it. Stella had said Jessica was still sick with a bad cough. If Ms. Zhu was really her mother, surely she would find her. In this day and age, it wasn't hard to track someone down. He didn't want to add to Jessica's stress. Stella already knew about the donation. She thought it was a brilliant move, not from a charitable standpoint, but from a strategic one. It was a PR coup that would generate more buzz than millions in advertising. She didn't say any of this to Leo, of course. In the early stages of love, praise and support were all that was needed. Leo texted, "Next time, we should come here. It's loud and crowded and fun. We can add it to our to-do list." Stella replied, "Okay, I'll add it to the list." She was keeping a running memo of things they wanted to do together. Stella, are they any good? The singers? Leo, they're okay. The sound system might be part of the problem, but the main guy is handsome. Some boy band called Starfall something. Stella, I wish I could hear you sing. Smiling face with hearts. Leo, I wish I could sing for you. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Down below, the band took a break. The owner got on the mic and asked if anyone from the audience want to come up and sing. Silence. Leo typed quickly. Is it good time? I could video call you in a minute. Stella. Yes, perfect. It wasn't really. She and Jessica were the only two in the dorm room, and drawing the curtain felt rude. But she wasn't going to miss this. Leo hurried downstairs and spoke to the owner. The stage was already equipped with a phone stand and a ring light for people who wanted to live stream their performances. He clipped his phone in, started the video call with Stella, and sat on the tall stool. The trip to D.C. had been a whirlwind, opening his eyes to a new world. The art was exhilarating, the exhibition terrifying. He envied Sean's quiet confidence. He met so many new people. Alex's charming cousin, Connor's self-assured sister, and Connor himself, a man who shone like polished obsidian. He'd seen so much, tasted so much. The only thing missing was Stella. He wanted to sing a song for her. He gave the sound tech a track, and a gentle melody, like a clear mountain spring, began to play. The chattering crowd, busy editing their photos of the band, didn't pay much attention at first. Leo smiled at the face on his phone screen and began to sing. Green tiles on the roof, a white horse on new mud, wildflowers and banana leaves, a red scarf dyed by the dusk. His voice was like a soft breeze after spring rain, carrying the scent of wet earth. Raindrops fall from the eaves, chimney smoke begins to rise. The song was an enchantment. It conjured images of a distant mountain village, of a world far from the noisy, crowded bar. He was singing only for Stella, but slowly, mysteriously, the buzz of the bar began to fade. The chatter died down. People looked up from their phones. A hush fell over the crowd, leaving only Leo's voice and the gentle lapping of the river outside. Up on the balcony, Shelley and the others realized what was happening. Leo was on stage, singing to his girlfriend over video call. It was impossibly romantic. The bar's state-of-the-art sound system, designed to make mediocre singers sound good, turned Leo's voice into something transcendent. The owner stood frozen, convinced a superstar had secretly taken his stage. Alex and Connor stopped their debate mid-sentence. Connor stared at the boy on the stage, at his easy grace and a gentle smile playing on his lips. He'd been to exclusive clubs where real celebrities performed, and he'd become jaded. But this was different. This was pure, unadulterated talent. He put down his beer and picked up his glass of water, the cool liquid clearing his head. Alex knew Leo could sing, but this was on another level. The last time, it had been heart-wrenching. Tonight, it was like a cool, damp towel on a fevered brow, a gentle memory from a long-lost childhood. Searching, seeking, cold, and lonely, the crescent moon falls in a deserted well. In her dorm room, Jessica, who had been reading, let her book fall to her lap, the pages unturned. Stella sat cross-legged on her bed, holding her phone, a wide, happy smile spreading across her face. Your long hair ripples the water, a white cloth on the stone shore. The river sprites pull their long boats, ferrying the ancient past. Stella thought he would look so handsome in traditional clothes, with long hair, like a scholar from an old poem. Leo sang on, his heart full. He sang of longing and love, of joy and a faint, sweet melancholy. His voice held a universe of emotion, and for a few minutes, under the neon lights of the waterfront, everyone in the bar stopped to listen, their own hearts echoing the song. He sang on stage. He filmed from the crowd. A slow song, a story of love. Sean held his camera, an anonymous figure in the audience. He was still reeling from the events at the gallery, his chest tight with unspoken emotions. He wanted to call his family, but he was too self-conscious to speak his loud, rural dialect in front of these new, sophisticated friends. He would wait until he was alone. So he worked, channeling his turmoil into the familiar, comforting motions of his craft. It was what he always did. When he was a boy, faced with a problem he couldn't solve, he would go to work. He'd shoulder a heavy load, the weight digging into his skin, and focus only on the path ahead. One foot in front of the other. Don't fall. Shift the weight when you can. Keep going. There's the familiar tree. Then the bend in the road. Almost home. Work until you're too tired to think. But the exhaustion and confusion were always there, waiting. And then he heard Leo's song. Green tiles on the roof, a white horse on new mud, wildflowers and banana leaves, a red scarf dyed by the dusk. In an instant, he was transported home. He saw the frost on the cabbage in the yard, his grandmother dozing in her rocking chair, a faded tiger blanket on her lap. He saw his mother kneading dough, his father mending the sheet pen, his sister doing her homework at the kitchen table, her pigtails bobbing like antennae. He was home. Tears welled in his eyes, but a smile spread across his face. The music was a balm for the bruised and weary heart of every workhorse in the city. It was cardiac resuscitation for souls not yet dead, but no longer truly alive. People chase celebrities because their own lives feel mundane. They need something, anything, to feel a part of, to prove they exist outside of their daily grind. Fandom provides an instant community, a shared identity that transcends background and personality. The most devoted are the ones who were there from the beginning, who feel they have nurtured their idol's rise to fame, that their success is a shared victory. The fans of the Starfall trio were here tonight, a well-organized army, doing the hard work of building their idol's career, one social media post at a time. They were students, office workers united in their collective project. The bar was a cross-section of the city. Tourists, young fans, lonely older men and women looking for a connection in the noisy, chaotic night. Everyone was shouting to be heard over the din, selling something, wanting something. But Leo's voice was not the wind. It was the sun. It didn't demand attention. It gave warmth. And as it washed over the crowd, shoulders relaxed. Burdens were lifted. If you could see the music, it would look like a beam of light, slicing through the invisible strings that tethered each person to their predetermined path. For a few precious moments, they were free. The girl who had been frantically posting to her fan account paused, her phone forgotten in her hand. I just want a friend, she thought, someone to text when I'm eating instant noodles alone. She looked up at the stage. The boy singing wasn't a star. He was just a boy, singing with a smile on his face and love in his eyes. And as she watched him, she felt a smile spread across her own face. She felt her own heart fill with love. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, a tear of pure, unadulterated joy. In this moment, I am free, she thought. My smile, my tears, my swaying hands, they are mine. The song had the power to connect with everyone. For a brief, magical interlude, even fate seemed to be taking a rest, its great hand still, allowing a gentle breeze of its own making to sweep across the Georgetown waterfront.